wedding down in Charleston.
Okay, why don't we begin? It's 7 o'clock, so we're here today at the Danvers Town Hall in the Toomey Room here for our March 11th, 2025 meeting of the Danvers Planning Board. My name is Louis George. I'm chair. I'm here joined by, to my left is Jean Hartnett, who's our clerk. To her left is Michael DeCoulis. To my right is Jim Sears, and to his right is Tim Spittle. And we're joined by Josh Morris with the town of Danvers. And we'll also be joined a little later in the agenda with Aaron Henry, as our Director of Land Use and Community Services. So let's look at the agenda here today. So our first agenda item is a public hearing for 50 Independence Way. It's a request for site plan review pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw submitted by Chick-fil-A, CO Bowler Engineering, for property in the Commercial 3 C3 zoning district. The applicant proposes a standalone restaurant with a drive-through and associated site modifications, map 63, lot 5, unit 1. So is the applicant here? And Josh, did you have anything you wanted to say at the outset, or we?
Just one kind of macro comment.
Speaking on the
Yep, sorry, which is one macro comment. We are still, with the development team and the engineering division, working through a memo that was provided to us late yesterday. So I think with that, unfortunately, we won't be voting on this item tonight, but we'd like to, have a good, productive conversation about the application and talk through any questions or comments that the board has. So.
Okay. All right, very good. And the applicant, if you can identify yourself, and the floor is yours.
Sure. My name is Joey Fonseca with Bowler. And here with me today is Zach Middlebrooks with Chick-fil-A, Aaron Fredette with Bowman is our traffic consultant.
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Sorry. Is this
Yeah.
on? Maybe I just got to go. And so we have Zach Middlebrooks with Chick-fil-A, Aaron Fredette with Bowman Associates, our traffic consultant, and Andrew Hayes with Eastern Real Estate as representing the property owners here at this location. So I see you have the presentation up on the screen. So that we're here today to discuss 50 Independence Way here. This is the former Friendly Toast building. And Josh, if you can flip to, yeah, perfect. Thank you. And as most of you know, it's probably familiar with this location. I've kind of highlighted here in sort of a turquoise color, but that's the existing building location, just to kind of give you a feel for the location of the site. It is within the Liberty Tree Mall. The overall property component for this sitting within that Liberty Tree Mall is about 20 acres. And the site's located in a Commercial 3 district. So this is a good image here just to kind of show where the main access points are here. So Endicott is running kind of on the bottom of the page here. So there's a signalized intersection there with Independence and Endicott. Customers can enter the plaza through that signalized intersection and then make their way towards this location, turn left into the parking area. And you're in sort of a larger parking field from that signalized intersection. There's other access points throughout to get you there, as many ring roads through the Liberty Tree Mall. That's kind of the direct access route there. So just kind of briefly touching on some of the existing conditions out there. So the Friendly Toast building consists of about a 5,100 square foot building that's there. There are some patio areas and walkways surrounding it. There's parking directly adjacent to the building, but there's also shared parking throughout that area. That's kind of just part of overall shared parking agreement through the mall. As well as cross-parking agreements. The utilities out here are serviced through gas connections, the existing electric and water and sewer, as well service the site today. If you all are familiar with the site, there is a grade change from up top on the top of the sheet there to the bottom, so flowing sort of north to south. about a 5-foot grade change. So the drainage here basically just sheet flows towards the south, and there's a few catch basins located along that bottom edge there, kind of where on this image you can kind of see where the that kind of landscaped area is on the bottom of the sheet below the building. It gets captured in there, and then everything's conveyed towards the left, towards where Josh has his cursor today, where it's an open culvert, which then flows south and continues off-site today. Under the proposed condition, Josh, if you can just flip to the next sheet. Actually, this is just a survey of the plan, so again, just kind of highlighting where the building is, kind of that tan color on the site, and the various parking associated with it. To the left, that building that's shown on the left there is it's an existing Firestone building, and again, that's just a large parking field kind of in between the two. Next slide, please.
Oh, it's a little delayed.
Yeah, it's all good. Thank you. So this is just kind of a colored representation of the site plan. I'll first start by saying the red highlighted box that you can see on the screen just represents the existing building location. So the proposed building is relatively in that same location on the site, just to give you a little context of where this new building is. So it's in the same spot. It's about the same footprint area as well. It's about a 5,100 square foot building as well, and that's just represented in that kind of that tan color on that plan. So the proposed restaurant will have a total of 70 seats interior. So as far as the parking calcs required for this, there are 59 parking spaces required, which represents a combination of the interior seat count as well as accounting for 35 employees during their largest shift for the restaurant. So that gives us a total of about 59 parking spaces. Again, as I said earlier, this is kind of a shared parking area, so there are an abundance of parking throughout here. And again, it's part of cross parking agreements between the various entities for the Liberty Tree Mall here. With this layout, as you can see here, there are a 2-lane drive-through approach from the beginning, which is the entrance is at the bottom of the page here. There's actually a 3-lane entrance. 2 lanes will be for the drive-through use, and then that 3rd lane will be used in the event of what we can get through. We can get to it, but it's more of a mobile through adaptation here. But it's also giving employees a drive aisle to reach the parking spaces that are located east of the building. It might be hard to see on this plan, but there are a row of parks that are kind of adjacent to the drive-through that'll be noted as just employee parks. That's because really those are the only cars that are going to be able to access it through the drive-through. But it is a double drive-through going through. There are 2 canopies. It's similar to most Chick-fil-A locations. There's a canopy at the order board, which is that first canopy. It's kind of a darker shaded gray area. And then as you order and you progress through to the pickup window, there's a larger canopy there, which is more of the meal pickup zone. And I'm not sure if all of you have visited Chick-fil-A, but this is a pretty common drive-through, pretty standard drive-through approach here for this building. We've got a patio area located south of the building. You can see those dark kind of circle areas. That's just indicating some outdoor patio seating there. And then we've just adjusted the parking area directly in front to accommodate obviously some spaces along the face of the building, but also some ADA spaces as well to get close access to the main door there. So drive-through flow is kind of a counterclockwise direction. You exit out into it's what is an existing drive aisle today. So that drive aisle is not changing. The curb cut's not changing along Independence Way. We're really just kind of altering the parking kind of directly around the building. And adding some additional landscape end islands as today it's just all striped, so it's kind of a free-for-all there. So making more kind of efficient, more formal kind of parking and drive aisles throughout this portion of the site. North of the drive aisle that I was just mentioning is it's a little bit hard to see on this plan, but is the trash enclosure location. It's kind of in the northeast corner of the site. Yep. And so that's just two locations there where you'll have two trash bins will be serviced, and there's a shed there for the operator to store shovels and other items in there as well. The overall parking in this area, just due to this development and certainly with the drive-through, is a reduction of 39 total parks, or 38 total parks, I'm sorry, in here. So again,
Excuse me, how many total?
38 total reduction in parking. And the utilities will all be serviced, will likely just be connecting to existing services in there. I know there are some comments we got back from engineering that we're working through that, but we're anticipating just tying into sewer, water. There'll be a new electrical primary that'll run here to a transformer, and then a new gas service to the building as well. Stormwater will be similar to what's out here today, albeit there'll be some additional catch basins throughout the drive-through to collect some of that additional stormwater, and that's going to be being generated within the drive-through area as it is isolated. It is just all being captured and conveyed towards the existing system within the plaza. This layout does reduce impervious coverage by a considerable amount. It's about 9,000 square feet of paved area that's going to be converted to landscaped, whether it's lawn area or it's going to be landscaped, and that's all really represented in the green hatching that you see on the screen here. So a pretty large reduction in impervious coverage. With that, obviously less stormwater being generated through here, and obviously you've got the benefits of additional water quality as well through the additional catch basins with deep sump catch basins and hooded outlets as well. We've also included lighting and landscape plan as well with this set. If you can skip a few, I think I've got a few sheets in between.
I think this is the landscape. And
Yeah,
then
it's the landscape plan, which is similar to the similar plan that you were seeing earlier. With the landscaping, of course, we've got a large reduction in impervious coverage. So with the landscaping, I know there are landscaping regs within as part of the site plan review application here, but we're proposing about 3 additional canopy trees, 18 evergreen trees as well throughout, and then about over 200 of just ornamental grasses and shrubs kind of throughout this area, really to just kind of bring out some additional landscape and enhance what's out there today, which is kind of a sea of pavement and parking out here today. Lighting, there'll be some additional light poles throughout the parking area, again through the drive-through, as well as just within the parking itself. There's building-mounted lights as well. I know that was submitted as part of the overall design, and this is just kind of highlighting those additional light poles in the parking area throughout the site. And that's really it from a high level. From a site design, yep. And then we've included some building elevations as well here, which is on the screen now. And I will say the trash enclosure that I was discussing earlier, there's actually an image of it there on the left. It's constructed in the same materials as the building, so it does match that same kind of brick facade that you see here. And then the front doors are a solid door, so there's no chain link or vertical slats or anything through there. So a nice looking trash enclosure throughout there. But and the look of the building, the architectural, this is prototypical for Chick-fil-A, so they're all pretty standard build here, so standard colors as well here on this. And I think that's really it from a overall just site plan perspective, and obviously we're in front of you all for site plan review for this use. So I would turn it over to Erin Fredette with Bowman. She submitted the traffic memo that was prepared along with this, and kind of just run through that, and then we can open it up to any questions that you all might have on the heels of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Again, if you could just please identify yourself for the record, that'd be
Sure
great.
thing. For the record, Erin Fredette with Bowman Consulting Group, traffic engineers on the project. I'll give a brief overview of what was included in our traffic assessment, but of course, always happy to answer any questions that the board may have. So the traffic assessment that we provided for the proposed redevelopment really focused on the change in trip generation for the proposed project site. As previously stated, it is an existing restaurant, and while we recognize that a restaurant with drive-through is going to generate more traffic. When we consider the particular context that this location is in, we start to see that the actual overall increase in trips is not projected to be as substantial as a, brand new site plopped down in the middle of nowhere. So when we utilize the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual in order to estimate the number of trips associated with the proposed Chick-fil-A, we then took away the trips that are associated with the existing restaurant, also utilizing the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip gen manual. We then take additional credit for what we call pass-by trips. So these are trips that are already on Endicott Street, passing by, going to other retail uses. And for a fast food restaurant with drive-through land use, in excess of 50% of trips to and from that kind of land use can be attributed to this pass-by. So again, that's another reduction in new trips to and from the project site. And there's also another credit we call internal capture. So that would be trips that are already in the Liberty Tree Mall. So somebody's already going to Target or Michael's and then they decide to go to the Chick-fil-A or vice versa. So that's a further reduction in new trips to and from the site. And so when you start to take into account all of those potential reductions, the overall increase starts to become relatively small in comparison to the overall number of trips. The other item that our trip assessment included was a review of potential trip distribution. So Liberty Tree Mall benefits from excellent access. It has a number of access points, including 2 on Endicott Way and 2 others towards the west and the north. And so in combination with the trip credits that I mentioned and the ability for vehicles to enter and exit a number of different locations, recognizing that the Independence Way and Commonwealth Avenue are likely going to be the more predominantly used locations for accessing the site. It does start to diminish any significant impact to a singular movement or approach. We also looked at analysis that was recently conducted along the adjacent roadway network in order to understand how it might be able to, how it might be able to absorb some of these additional trips. And based on a review of that analysis, there is ample capacity to accept the additional trips, which were, based on the analysis provided in the assessment, is shown to be about 2% or less increase on Endicott Street during the peak hour, which in this case is the Saturday midday. So I know that was a lot to kind of run through quickly. I'm happy to dive into any additional detail or turn it back over to Joey.
Just for clarification, so in the report, I know you see the trip generation, is that, that's, I guess you're looking at like tables 2 and 3, is that really where sort of the bottom line is?
Confirm that for
Yeah.
you. Yes, tables 2 and 3, and I would say table 3 is really the bottom line with the the Saturday peak hour is the peak, and we're seeing about 55 entering vehicles and 55 exiting vehicles, which over an hour is, let's say, one additional trip per minute.
Okay, so you said 55 additional?
55 additional, or what we call new trips. So those are trips that are not on the study area, or they're not on Endicott, they're not on these area roadways, but would be added as a result of the proposed redevelopment.
Okay, got it, okay. Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions that you all might have as part of this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. I'll go turn it over to the board with any questions. Tim, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Sure. In regards to traffic, I'm looking through the report. I'm curious, maybe we can flip to the page, what your breakdown was of the directionality of sort of where people are coming from and how they'll navigate through the
Sure.
through the
Does he have the
plot.
Okay, just these two. It's
be
labeled
the last
figure
one.
3, Josh, if you have
Mhm.
it. You might only have figures 1 and 2. I mean, if you bring up the last aerial image, I can speak to that.
In the presentation that we were just talking about, not the traffic memo, not the memo.
I mean, if you have the memo.
I have the memo.
Oh, yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Yep, it's figure 3, I think, is the one. And so, yeah, based on the
Figure 2.
information that the traffic volume information we were able to review, we were estimating about 25% coming from each direction on 128, about 10% further east on Endicott, and then about 25% to the south of Endicott, in understanding that there is additional access to 95 in that direction, and then a smaller percentage of 15% up towards Sylvan Street.
Is this the figure?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you can. It might be hard to see the text on here, but it's looking at the arrows. About 50% to and from 128, and the remainder are distributed on the more local roadways.
Gotcha. I think there's a separate figure 3. If you keep
Figure 4.
scrolling, Josh.
Figure 4?
Figure 4.
No, it says figure 3 from Van Ness.
Oh, yes. So
Associates.
that's the information that we reviewed from the previous analysis.
Got it. Yeah, I was thinking more about the sort of much smaller micro zone of like Independence Way, Commonwealth Ave, Endicott, just because it seemed a little. I know, having gone to those restaurants, like it's not a direct route because you can't turn left from Independence. So I'm
Right.
curious what it looks like in terms of.
So I don't know that we have that specific level of routing, but I would expect that the majority of people coming from the east or 128 are actually going to bypass Independence Way and go to Commonwealth, turn right, and then around the Firestone and turn right in that way, because I think that's the easiest way. And I think that's the way that like a Google Maps would take you, because otherwise you're having to U-turn around the median on Independence Way to get in, or take a left, go past the median on the, I believe that's still Independence Way, to turn left into the parking field. So, yeah, I would expect that most people coming from east are going to take that second signal into Liberty Tree.
Yeah, and I think I saw somewhere, a sign for no U-turns on Independence Way, because we don't want people going up, turning around to take the right into the Chick-fil-A. Is there any signage to tell people to go to Commonwealth? Right, it's like.
I don't think that it's currently included in the proposed package, but I don't see why we couldn't add some wayfinding signage to ensure people are going the preferred way with all the right turns as opposed to the U-turn.
Yeah, I guess, playing defense, saying don't take a U-turn, people will still do it. So if you give them the proactive, hey, go this way, it's going to be easier, that might be helpful. I think there was also discussion in the report about repaving on Independence Way. Is that right?
There was Tim's referring to
Engineering memo,
an engineering
sorry.
memo that we received late yesterday afternoon. So I think that we're still between the development team. We haven't had a chance to really talk through that too much, but.
Yeah, and Andrew's here as well. I'm not sure if you want to maybe mention
Yeah,
it a little
that'd
bit,
be-
but we have been discussing it. It's, we're in a position where we're only able to really modify our lease area for it, and that's sort of outside of that, but Andrew can certainly discuss that in a little more detail on those.
Yeah, again, if you can identify yourself for the record and just sort of answering the question. I know I had a question in terms of that as well.
Sure.
Just in terms of where the jurisdiction, where your sort of area is and sort of what can be done.
Absolutely. So my name is Andrew Hayes with Eastern Real Estate. We are the property owner. To address the first question, we have had conversations with the Simon Properties, who actually maintains the common roadways at the property. And what we understand from them is from prior proceedings for this board, there's actually an ongoing capital plan to improve those roads. And so we are working with them and coordinating with them on that effort. As it relates to the specific lot lines that we own, if you go back to, I think, one of the prior plans.
Is this one helpful, Andrew?
I can work with this. So we own a portion of that Independence Way stretch that was identified in the memo. Effectively, it's
What portion do you?
about 3/4 of the southbound portion.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So maybe I could just clarify my understanding, because I'm looking at the property map here, is Independence Way as it comes in from Endicott and takes a right is a town road, is that correct?
No, private.
That's why I
Everything,
asked.
everything in here, this interior, everything we're looking at is private. But what I think Andrew's alluding to is because the mall is owned by several different entities. So Simon, it gets complicated, but I think what we're trying to clarify, confirm, is that I believe that Simon owns, if you're coming off of Endicott Street, you take the right into that section of Independence Way. The north they own, and then you're saying plan south that
A
you own
portion
a
of that.
portion of
Correct.
that, the section of Independence Way closest to the proposed building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you said it was a third. a third,
About 3/4 of that.
3/4 of that.
And again, the common roadway holistically is managed by Simon.
Okay.
Is
So
that by agreement with you all?
That is correct. There's a private party agreement that it takes into account all of the property owners.
okay. And I believe the roadway improvement plan you're discussing was before us because of the Mass DOT park and ride.
That's right.
I believe that covered Commonwealth Ave. I can't recall if it covered Independence.
I believe that it does as well.
It does? Okay. And I think we all expressed some skepticism at the time of that plan that it would be followed through with because of the poor condition of I at least did, of the Simon properties and their ability to maintain the roadways. So is that something we can get an update on in terms of what they've already promised to do?
Yes, I believe that, actually, while we're looking at it right here, in the fall, I believe, and I could confirm at a future date, that this intersection, this T intersection of Commonwealth, and I believe it's the section that's also called Independence Way, that in front of, sort of in between Dick's and Sporting Goods and the 99, that there was a section of it that was what we're calling like Plan A or Phase 1,
Mm-hmm.
that they did a mill and overlay on a decent or moderate sized portion of that intersection, but I can confirm. I know that we were talking about it in the fall. I have a bunch of emails back and forth, but I believe that work was completed in the fall, but I could confirm. So that was that was essentially the first segment that they were supposed to do for that maintenance improvement plan that you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean, if the engineering memo is covering a further proposal for repaving on Independence Way, I think it would be helpful for us to have a sort of holistic view of what they committed to last time, progress they've made, was it on time?
Sure.
Because it does seem to be important that if this is part of the approval, that we know they're actually sticking to what they commit to.
Sure.
Last question I have, I've never seen a drive-through with 3 lanes. I'm just curious, sort of like, how does it work? And do you have other examples around the area of that sort of setup?
Sure. So Newington, New Hampshire has a 3-lane drive-through that was recently, that opened in November of last year. So the 3rd lane is more of, as more and more of Chick-fil-A customers use their phones to order, on their phone, it's easy to order through their app. They're sort of slowly rolling out kind of this 3rd lane as what they're calling a mobile through lane. So if you have an order on your phone and you're not sitting in that drive-through queue to go to the pickup window to get your meal, you can get into that mobile through lane, which is that outside lane, and just kind of bypass those 2 the inside lanes, which is really just your traditional ordering lanes, get your meal, and then you're exiting, and that way you're not kind of stuck in a queue in there if you order through your mobile app. It's slowly becoming popular, so it's more of giving the operator the opportunity to turn that on and turn that off if they feel that mobile through and mobile adaptation here is really taking off. They can keep that open during their peak times, but they can also turn it off. And in that event, when you order, I haven't done this through the app yet, but it'll tell you whether to get into that mobile through lane, or you're just going to enter into the traditional ordering lanes. And there'll be signage out there as well the operator will have to direct anyone through there. So if that outside lane isn't open, they'll just enter the queue like a traditional customer would, and then just wait in that queue and then pick up their meal and exit as needed. It also serves as another purpose to access those proposed parking spaces along the right, and then also a fire route through there. There is no canopy over that 3rd lane, so it does allow for a fire truck to kind of navigate through the drive-through and exit if in the event that there is an emergency and the truck needs to be within that drive-through lane. So that's it. It is sort of a newer style drive-through. Like I said, the closest one to here is Newington. There are certainly sites that are existing Chick-fil-A restaurants that their custom projects team is looking at to try to see if there's a way to add an additional lane in there. It does just increase the efficiency of the drive-through, certainly when you've got more and more customers ordering through their app.
Makes sense. And that does mean that human is walking it out to the cars in the second and third lanes, correct?
It does, yes. And typically that's on all Chick-fil-A operations during their peak times. They will have team members out in the drive-through lane taking orders underneath that order canopy on iPads. And then as you head towards the pickup window, there'll be team members out there, delivering meals. And they're also kind of delivering meals and also dispersing the traffic as well. So you don't have two cars exiting at the same time. They kind of stagger the meals so that everyone's kind of exiting in a staggered approach as they're leaving the drive-through. Chick-fil-A's kind of mastered, their drive-through operation to make it as efficient as they can. And part of having team members in the drive-through is they've realized that during their peak times they can quickly get meals processed through there and delivered to their customers quickly and keep traffic flowing through their drive-through.
Yeah. No other questions from me. Thanks.
Jim, questions?
I'm assuming you didn't, did you think of reusing the building? It's kind of a shame to tear down the building, but I'm assuming the drive-through was the issue.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah. So the location of the building was closer to Independence Way, and then having the drive-through through there. We would have lost a lot of parking. We had initially had a concept where we slid the drive-through over, but it did result in a net loss of losing those spaces along the drive-through, and through through our coordination with Andrew Hayes and his team, we really needed to maximize the amount of parking in here, knowing that we were losing some parks just due to the drive-through location here. So that was one way for us to gain some parking spaces back.
Okay. On your architectural plan, can you show that for a second?
Sure.
Josh?
Different set, sorry.
Yeah, it's just on that one sheet, you had the
Yeah,
one,
the
yep.
one-pager.
the
Yep.
one pager.
Yep.
There it is. Yep.
So those depictions only show 2 lanes, I believe.
Correct. So this is just a design overview sheet. So that site plan's not site-specific site plan. This is
Okay.
just a design overview, just kind of highlighting some of the features of this prototype model, just highlighting the color palette, the building, the architectural features on it, some of the building signage, and then, the patio materials as well.
Okay. Are you going to have any charging stations in the parking lot?
So that does come up often. The issue with fast food restaurants is just it's a quick turnover. So I don't have an electric vehicle, but you're not going to get much of a bump.
Right.
Parking here for quick serve, it does serve its purpose at other locations. So we typically try to avoid having that, unless it's required, unless that's a requirement for from whether it's building or the board as well. But it is a tough compromise with these locations.
What about solar panels? This was brought up at other sites, kind of trending to the future. Is that considered at all?
So I do know that the roof themselves, it's a white roofing membrane, which, as far as the whole heat island does have an impact there. So I know that that's standard throughout all their prototypes. I'm not sure if if there is any thought to photo panels on the roof. I do know that they have a lot of HVAC components up there. There's gas, et cetera, through there, and I know that space would be limited, just knowing that they've got units up there on the roof. So it's certainly a question we can ask, but I'm not sure that there's enough real estate there to make it efficient.
Okay. I'm assuming the plants are all drought resistant. Do you have irrigation for the plants, or are they?
There will be irrigation through there. I can verify with our landscape team if they're drought tolerant. I know that's been sort of the directive on a lot of our locations, so I'm
Yeah,
assuming
that's
that
what
they
we
are.
require.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like to know that.
Is that gonna be grass or is it gonna be mulch?
It's a combo of both. I can confirm that, but it's a combo of both mulch areas and grass areas through there. I think that's denoting sod versus, some disturbed areas that will just receive some hydroseed.
I'm just a little concerned about the logistics of having someone standing in the drive-throughs, filling phone orders and directing traffic in the winter time and
Sure.
unseasonal weather. How does that work? Maybe the gentleman who from operations can explain it. I'm just a little concerned how, especially with trying to get the product out and, do you have extra staff to can accommodate that?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a pretty standard approach for all Chick-fil-A's. So the part of the canopy addition, because that is newer. The older prototypes didn't have canopies; they were just awnings over the pickup window. But part of having team members out there was to kind of protect them from inclement weather, and also just ordering as a guest, having it covered, so you're not getting any rain kind of blowing in on you. The canopies do have, up here in the Northeast, we have, there are heat shields up on the ceiling mounted heat, so that it does offer some heat for the team members that are out there. They're obviously dressed appropriately up here in the Northeast, but if the weather conditions are severe, like lightning, if it's severe cold, they're not going to have team members out there. They're gonna operate the drive-through as a traditional drive-through, where you're going to order at the order boards and you're going to pick up at the pickup area. The pickup window / door, it truly is. It can open as a window. It can also open as a full-size door where team members can walk in and out. So in the event of there not being team members out there, they'll just be picking up their meals through the window, just like a traditional drive-through use. But this is, the team members are trained. They are wearing protective gear. Obviously in the winter months they are wearing I know some locations have heated vests that they give their team members. It's really per the operator here, but they are trained in it. They're dressed appropriately. And like I said, there are some up here in the Northeast, at least, having some heat underneath that. Those canopies do help through there. There are specific areas within the drive-through that are striped lanes for team members. They're 3 feet wide. It's kind of indicated on this plan as well. Where the team members will be walking back and forth, again, just kind of taking orders, taking 2 or 3 cars underneath that canopy, just being able to kind of have that flexibility to walk through and take multiple orders. But like I said, they're wearing highly visible vests, and they're all trained specifically for this drive-through.
Is that area where the tables are outside, is that a fence around it
There's an aluminum patio fence
Okay.
surrounding it.
to keep people from,
Yeah, it kind of encloses it,
yeah,
prevents kids kind of running out.
good idea.
Yeah.
Just one comment on the roadway maintenance. I know the representative from Simon Mall came last time, and they did do some paving over near the new bus terminal and a little bit in front of the Dick's, but there's new potholes, unfortunately, with the weather we had the last month. So I'd like to see, that taken care of, hopefully. And there are they did replace some light poles near the new bus terminal, but there are several that have not been replaced, still on the ring roads of the property, in front of Dick's, and heading up the other way toward Home Depot. So I think it would be a good improvement of the site, and it's good that they are, addressing that. But there's a big manhole cover that needs to be raised in front of Liberty Tree Medical Center, which they put a little, 1 foot patch of pavement, but it dips down about a foot now. So there are some hazards on the roadway that should be addressed. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Okay. Mike?
Thank you. So I just had a few questions. I just went and looked on a Google Maps of a Chick-fil-A just so I could see the drive-through a little bit better. And the Chick-fil-A I happened to look at had 28 cars that were in line. Is there like a busy time specifically that there is that many cars? Is that typical? Is that Again, this was just a random Chick-fil-A on Google Maps that I happened to look at.
And it had to be at that specific
It was the
time.
Framingham location, just it had the
All
same
right.
drive-through and
Well,
it had
so
28
so
cars
it's
in the
good
drive.
to know the location. So the
Yeah.
Framingham location was an older prototype where it went from 2 lanes to a single lane.
Correct.
So that as Chick-fil-A became a little more popular up here in the Northeast, that's kind of a pinch point where they knew they had to improve, and that kind of brought the 2-lane approach. So you got 2 lanes in throughout the entire drive-through, where before you kind of had maybe 10 cars at the order board and then it would merge into a single lane.
Yeah.
And it was certainly an inefficient approach. This is more an efficient approach where you've got, the double stacking there, 2 order lanes and 2 meal delivery lanes as well to leave. So that's a little bit, that's not really comparing apples and apples to this
Okay.
location. That operator does a great job even with that approach, and they're looking to maybe potentially modify that as well. But that is the older prototype in there. Their busier times, certainly, it does vary from locations, but usually lunch and dinner time are usually they're pretty popular. Some locations will be, mostly busy from say 11 to through dinner time. Maybe there's a little bit of a slowdown in between there, but breakfast isn't very popular up here as it is in the south. So typically, there are a few customers that will go there for breakfast, and their hours are 6:30 to 10 Monday through Saturday. They're closed on Sunday, but it's typically that lunch and dinner shift is typically the
Okay.
busiest. And to that point too, the team members are only out there in the drive-through lane during their peak times. The operator will know, like I said, it does vary from locations, but the operator will get an idea once they're open and everything kind of normalized after their grand opening, when those peak times are. So he'll know when to have his team members out there in the drive-through to kind of prevent a lot of that stacking beyond the order board. The operator obviously wants to run it as efficient as you all want the drive-through operations to be efficient as well, certainly on this site.
So are the cars typically in the drive-through lanes? Because obviously your drive-through backs into parking spots, so they try to keep them out of that area. Is that the goal?
Yeah, so this is sort of the newer prototype for Chick-fil-A, meaning it's isolated. You've got I can't remember off the top of my head how many cars that are stacking at the order board, but I think there's a total of 16, I think, total between, say, the entrance and the order board, where typically that was half. We only had maybe 8 in there. And really, this is just to do that. They know how many what that overall stack wants to feel, certainly during their peak times. They want all their cars to be within that isolated stack, so they're not, spilling out into drive aisles. And this approach, this length, is really what they're sort of aiming for on their new builds.
Okay, thanks. And then my last question is, the turning radius in like lane 1 looks super, super tight. Is that just looking at it in the image? Is it actually that tight? And do you know how wide the drive lanes are?
So the drive lane, the overall drive lane is 25 feet wide. For
the 3.
Sorry, this is 3 lanes. So 25 would be 2, so you'll have an extra 9 feet on top of that. So
and that includes
34.
the 3 foot
Correct. Correct.
So 34 minus the 6, I assume, because there's 3 walking areas, so minus 9.
3, correct. So each lane is about 9 feet, but the striping, it's all striped. There's no like curb or berm islands throughout the drive-through. It's all just wide open pavement. So that inside lane is typically they're all 20-foot radii in there. That's just typically what Chick-fil-A wants in their drive-through. That one's an 18, just given the angle of the order canopy that we had to modify from the first iteration here when we submitted. It is tighter, however, when we run our truck turn or car turns through there, there is ample room there. You are crawling, you're less than a mile per hour as you're turning through the drive-through. But the fact that these are striped and not raised curb islands or curbed does give you, it doesn't bring in those lanes where you feel too tight, you're going to hit a curb. So
Okay.
there's ample.
Thank you. And then, sorry, I just had one more question. Deliveries, food, like trucks, is it 18-wheelers? Is it
Correct.
box 18-wheelers?
Yeah,
And
they're
do you have a
so the
plan
larger
of delivery?
deliveries, they're WB50s. If they can get 62s, if they can get a 67, they'll use that. just to reduce the amount of trips, but they'll see what fits and what can navigate through the site, but typically it's a 50 or a 62.
And what would their plan of delivery be, and then what hours also would the
So their
delivery be?
hours is typically done before store opens. So they're overnight. They're going to be early morning before the store opens, and that's for two things. One, you're not disrupting the operations during the restaurant being open, but two, it does allow for the trucks to kind of cross over parking spaces as they move in to the delivery door, et cetera. It gives them a little more freedom to navigate through, especially larger plazas like this. I would imagine they're going to be turning Independence Way being on the top of the page there, turning right into the parking lot, and then performing U-turn, then exiting back out either Independent towards the right or heading left through there. It is a pretty large open parking field. It's not an isolated site where it's a little bit tighter if they were trying to navigate, so they've got enough room there to do their deliveries. But they are done, the larger truck deliveries are done early morning. They will have like bread deliveries, which are smaller box trucks that can happen during the day, but all the larger ones are prior to restaurant being open.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Jane?
Yeah, I have a question about the Endicott Street corridor. This might actually be, Josh, a question for you. So for 152, the Fidelity, they said that before they had a certificate of occupancy, they were going to redo all the signals on that whole corridor. So have they gotten their certificate of occupancy yet?
No, so they're doing that. They're working on that intersection as we speak right now. Yeah.
So would this Chick-fil-A and all of these traffic numbers, the 50-something additional trips in the peak Saturday, would that be included in the corridor redesign?
So in terms of when we were talking about 152
Yeah.
in that sort of analysis, I would say that this, these are additional this would be kind of built upon that. You know what I mean? These are
So we couldn't get this included in that.
So when we were talking about permitting 152, well, I guess.
If it's helpful, I
Yeah,
can.
helpful.
So I
help me
think based on what we're seeing, and again, the different points that people can enter and exit, I don't think there's any singular movement that's going to experience like all 50 of those trips. And
Okay.
so I think based on the analysis we saw for 152, I think all the right turns were level of service A. They were, there was really nothing kind of stopping people from getting in. And then coming out, I think we saw a level of service C at most of those left turns. And so we felt like the improvements that they were proposing as part of that would accommodate these
Okay.
trips. So I guess it's not specifically included, but I think we feel comfortable that the improvements as outlined for 152 would absorb these trips.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, I have some questions, and I'll ask some questions, and then this is a public hearing, so members of the public have any questions, they can pose them as well. But question I do have, though, and again, picking up on some of the points was made earlier about roadway issues. I mean, that's definitely something that we are concerned about in terms of in terms of when we had other site plans that have come up. I know that, for example, obviously the Logan Express, as well as when we've had Aldi as well locate, that is part of the condition of the site plan approval was an obligation to work with I think it was Simon for that one, but working with the owner to ensure that any sort of necessary roadway work was done, because the concern that I know I have is just that is not just in terms of the existing, that especially with the winter, that the existing roadway around it has had some isn't in the best shape, but also I would imagine too, this is not just, this is you're doing a building demolition and then ultimately doing a construction of a new building. I think that's not going to necessarily make that surrounding area any better. And so I would think so as part of that, I think, and it is private roads, but people drive onto it, and they, we don't want people losing their rims or tires by, in terms of trying to go into the businesses. So that's something, and I know it was mentioned also, I think, in the engineering comments as well. So definitely we would want to expect some commitments there. With respect to A question, I guess this is more of a question I have, and maybe if we can just go to the overhead, Josh, sort of like the first, just sort of seeing the existing, yeah, right there. Just a question I have, I guess, in terms of, you know, this was touched upon, I guess, a little bit in terms of Jim's question about, in terms of, you know, team members going to like that third lane, but also I have a, you know, and I've asked the same question when we've had other, like when, for example, we've had Starbucks located in Danvers Plaza or at the Market Basket Plaza, of a concern of people who might, you know, someone who's getting their car worked on at Firestone, or someone who might be going, you know, someone who's an employee of one of the, you know, who's perhaps an employee of Total or an employee of Kohl's walking across, and sort of their safety. And so what sort of, you know, what sort of steps have you taken in terms of either lighting or crosswalks or such to ensure pedestrian safety?
So this lot is, there's no pedestrian access currently towards this site, and even, I think, along the top there on Independence Way. There aren't,
People will walk there.
right. Where our site plan currently shows a crosswalk along the front of the building, and that's really just to give, some of the, yeah, you can see it there. It isn't straight. It's just how those islands kind of matched up there, but it does give some pedestrians that are kind of parking in that area there, you know, just an avenue to get towards the front door. It also doubles to, you know, allow for the team members to their back of house door is facing that crosswalk, where they can take their trash totes out and head towards the trash enclosure.
Okay.
So there is some pedestrian, you know, access, you know, through there that we're providing, but as far as overall, like holistically through that parking lot, there aren't currently sidewalks or any kind of, you know, existing, you know, improvements outside of this area. And we're kind of, you know, we're just sort of looking at, you know, the improvements within this window that we're, you know, that we've been working with the,
Sure.
you know, the development team on.
But the thing is, I mean, the concern I have also, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And in terms of people potentially, you know, I would just ask, if you haven't already, if there's, you know, if there's any additional steps that you can take or anything you can look at in terms of, or, you know, with respect to pedestrian safety, again, from that person who might be walking from Firestone or someone who's an employee. Okay. Also, in terms of, another question I had, I guess this was picked up in terms of employees. So I think, you know, I guess the question was asked in terms of number of employees. And so I think you said, is it 35 employees?
That would be during their largest shift. And that again, that varies per location, but yeah, on an average, you know, 30 to 35 would be during their peak times.
Okay. And in terms of number of employee parking spaces, how many is that again?
So the dedicated parking along, the total overall, let's see, per the, let's see, it would be an additional 59 spaces. Well, the total overall parking is 59, so 24, so there'd be, it's basically 1 for 1 for the employees, so one spot per that maximum shift of 35.
Oh, so there'll be one spot for each.
They're not dedicated here on the site plan. I mean,
Remember
employees
the
would
audience,
just park.
I'm having difficulty hearing him. Thank you.
The parking would just be sort of, you know, they would likely park the furthest away from the building, just to allow the guests to park closer to the building. But the spaces along the drive-through, those will be dedicated to just employee parks. I believe that there are, I don't have that number in front of me, but I believe is there 15
Okay.
through there?
Do most of
10,
your
maybe 10?
employees,
I think it's 10, yeah.
10
most-
total, so 10 total spaces there.
10 total, do most employees, just in terms of the way it works, I mean, do most employees drive their vehicles, or do we have a mix of potentially, like, you know, maybe high school kids who have a parent drop off or that sort of thing? How does that generally work in your operation?
Yeah, I think you're right on. It's a mix of employees that are going to be driving. Some will bike, and there's a, you know, we have a bike rack location here. So there will be bikes. Some will be, you know, dropped off. There may be some, you know, carpooling. If some of the team members live close to each other, then they can do that as well. That's kind of how it's kind of handled at most.
In terms of the team, does the team generally, do you generally, you know, employ from the town and all, you know, from?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. absolutely. I think that's what they want. You know, they're here to be part of the community. That's what Chick-fil-A does.
Right.
They want to be a part of the community. They want to support the community. So that they certainly will be hiring.
Right. Now, in terms of I know you mentioned about the operator, so so I know Chick-fil-A is the applicant, but is this a franchise? How is this, or you'll have a separate operator?
It is a franchise here. There will be an operator
So you'd have to
selected. Yeah, you can certainly add in more to it, but yeah, there will be an operator selected for this location.
Okay. And again, could you introduce yourself?
Zach Middlebrooks with Chick-fil-A. So our model, it is a franchise, but it's a unique franchise model in that each location has a specific operator.
I see.
So the operator is generally from the community, is involved in the community, kids are in school in the community. So that was what Joey was touching on, the community element of it. Get involved with the local schools, parks, things like that. So yeah, it will be a local operator running just this restaurant.
Okay, so the local operator but the ultimate, the ultimate owner is Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A Inc. will own the asset.
Sure.
And the operator owns everything inside and is running the day-to-day business and the business operations per Inc. Guidelines.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I do want to say, real quick on that third lane of the drive-through, it is important to us, but in this particular instance, there's been a lot of talk. We've had a lot of conversation. We've been working with staff going back to like November on this particular deal. A lot of that third lane is kind of coming from fire. So yeah, we will use it, but I want to make it clear that third lane, it's going to get periodic use from our operations. But in this instance, it also allows that fire apparatus to completely swing around
I see.
360 degrees around this building. So that's kind of where a lot of that was kind of in discussions with Chick-fil-A and with the town fire department.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And I guess just a last question I have with respect to, and this sort of the lane sort of brought this back to me, in terms of how do typically like your Uber Eats or pickups and such, how do they generally work? Do they usually go through the drive-through? Do they park in a regular lot and walk in? How does that usually done?
Yeah, so that's becoming a bigger thing, right? Especially up here. And we are now establishing a separate dedicated area so they'll park and they'll come in the front door, and we're dividing, and it's a constant process with design, but we've got an area where there's a monitor board up so they can see their name. Usually a team member is sitting there checking the app, making sure you're getting what you're there to pick up. But it's kind of off to the side from where the normal customer would go through the line and place their order and dine in the restaurant.
Okay, I got it. And so then, will they have a designated parking spot, like a pickup?
We do.
only?
We put a couple of their portable signs. They're just little mountable bases that the operator can put out depending on the volume he sees. Some restaurants have higher volume with the Uber Eats and third party, but they usually have a couple of spots dedicated just so they can get in and out and not clog things up.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I don't have any further things. I was just going to ask Josh just where things stand in terms of engineering and all, where things are.
Yeah, no, things are moving along. We just, there was a memo from provided yesterday. There was just, 3 to 5 just items that I think engineering and the development team, mostly like utility related, other than the paving piece, which we got into tonight.
Right, I think there's some paving piece, and I think there was a mention about manhole covers.
There's just there's a couple utility things that I think just Bowler and our town engineering just need to kind of just work through. But I'd say those are the two buckets or items that just need to be kind of flushed out a little bit.
Be worked out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to that, I expect that it might be more efficient to maybe get on a call with the town engineer and just kind of, work through some of those comments. A lot of comments were, I'd say, like construction level details, which, we can certainly provide. But there were some larger items there that will need discussion, not only from our team, but also from Andrew and his team as well. So we'll continue to work with staff on that.
When would it be anticipated that construction would begin? In terms of, obviously, it depends on approvals and such, but when is, what's sort of the time period we're looking at?
So that was just a question I was asking Andrew. So obviously, if it was up to me, as soon as we could. But we do have the existing tenant with Friendlies, and don't hold me to this, but I believe they have till the end of the year. So when we start looking at the winter conditions and things like that, and their vacate period, if I had to give a time right now, I would probably say like a year from today.
Okay.
Like we would, as soon as the weather started breaking, February into March, start with the demolition and the construction.
Okay.
But when we come back to the board, we'll have a better, I'll be able to give a better timeline on that.
Good, thank you. All right. I don't have any other further questions from members of the board before I turn it over to members of the public? This is a public hearing, so if any members of the public have any questions or comments, they can come to the podium. Please make sure to address any comments through the chair. And please identify yourself for the record.
Good evening. I'm Bill McKenzie, 34 Harbor Street. The only thing that I see this beautiful greenery and shrubbery, and who's to put into place that they maintain that? I mean, Endicott Street looks awful right now, and I think over the passage, things just slip away. So there has to be something put in place that there's going to be maintenance on that. That's about all I could say.
Right.
It's a beautiful fit, by the way.
Thank you. Could I address that question to the applicant in terms of the sort of the long-term upkeep of the?
Yeah, so I will, and I appreciate that. So that kind of goes back to our operator model. We're not a franchise where one person owns 30 or 40 locations and just kind of deals with them as they need to. The operator is in the restaurant almost daily. And on top of that, so the operator owns it. It's their business, like an entrepreneur. And on top of that, Inc. also has a facilities department, and we come in and do regular maintenance. So if the parking lot starts to get bad, we're going to come in and assist the operator. So that's just how the Chick-fil-A model works. And they have that ownership.
And sort of as a follow-up to that, if let's say the owner is sort of falling down on the job, hopefully they wouldn't, but if they are, I assume that there are mechanisms in place where they could either, where the Chick-fil-A can take action to ensure it happens?
Or come in and take it as a corporate location. And we hope that doesn't happen. It happens very, very, very rare. The process to become an owner is pretty thorough. So yeah, they take a lot of pride in the locations.
Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other?
Well, the town can fine them as well. If they're not in compliance, someone issues a complaint, the town can go in and fine them.
Nova Samade, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Just in regards to the landscaping, I'd like to encourage any kind of native planting, which will help with drought tolerance, and if there's not as much maintenance, it's okay. They don't need quite as much because they are adapted for this area. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Okay. All right, then come back to the board. Any further questions or comments from members of the board?
No.
Okay. All right, so I think we'll need to,
A motion to continue.
so I think we will need to have a motion to continue the public hearing. And so do we anticipate in terms of when we'd be, in terms of being able to work with, the town engineering staff and such?
I mean,
When could the applicant come back?
yes, they could speak to that. but
What would be the next date?
yeah, it would be on March 25th.
Be the March
week-
25th.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today.
Yeah, I would ask that for now, if we could target the 25th. I just think that with us and with all the different ownerships, because it sounds like to me, the biggest issue is the roadways. And it's just understanding financial obligations from the three different parties and commitments so that we come back to you and we can answer that. Because I think that's ultimately what you guys want to hear. That's the biggest item I took away. So if we can do that, if we can do the 25th, and then we've been in close contact with staff, with Josh, and then if something comes up or we need to push 2 weeks, if you guys could be flexible with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and in terms of the, in terms of takeaways, I think it's the, questions and concerns raised in terms of roadways, landscaping for sure, in terms of particularly the drought resistance and native type plants, as well as I know concerns about pedestrian access, so you know, as long as hopefully you're taking some good notes.
Yeah,
Bill.
no, yeah, and the landscaping's no problem. I mean, that's an easy fix. It's just the roadway. I was taking notes, but the roadway's the biggest one, just
Sure.
because it's not just me. I can't just commit to it.
Understood.
Just one question I had. Is there any outdoor audio? Typically, we don't like to have any outdoor audio. So would you agree to a condition on that?
Most of the audio is inside. There is, as Joey mentioned, like we do have the team members out, but in, say, for a breakfast, say 7 o'clock a.m., if it's not a busy time, we will run off of a menu board. So there'll be audio off of that, but not like a,
Not like speakers playing music
No.
outside, because we do have some establishments that, believe it or
yeah,
not, do
there's-
that.
There's a little bit in the patio, but, you know, in the past, what is the decibel amount? We can come back with a decimal amount that we don't go over, and it's more like just easy, quiet, you know, family-type music that you would hear in
Okay.
the restaurant if you're sitting out enjoying your lunch.
Okay.
If you can
And
provide a
do
little more details on
Does
that.
staff have headsets? Is that how they communicate, pretty much? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I guess we'll need, Jean, I guess I think we'll need a motion.
I make a motion, we continue the 50 Independence Way public hearing to our next meeting, March 25th, 2025.
Okay, motion's been made to continue the public hearing to March 25th, 2025 for 50 Independence Way. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Tim. Okay, very good. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. The item is
Thank you all.
continued. Thank you. All right, so our next agenda item here, and there was a bit of a preview about this at our last meeting, and so this was the housing production plan. So this is discussion about the housing production plan, and I believe that we have a presentation by Mr. Aaron Henry.
Sorry, I was just making sure the technology was going to work.
I could have given a longer
Yeah,
intro, I
yeah.
guess, so.
Sorry, I'm just waiting. There's a little lag there on the screen. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me. As you said, Aaron Henry, the town's Director of Land Use and Community Services. Wanted to kind of start a process around a conversation for formalizing a draft housing production plan. The Housing Trust has been working on this for about a year, a little less than a year. And I thought I'd walk you through a little PowerPoint. I got about 15 slides, maybe 12. Maybe take me 15 minutes, and then turn it open for questions and comments. So I apologize. Josh, you're going to have to be my Vanna White, and if we could go to next slide. So a housing production plan, kind of at a high level, what is it? About a decade ago, the state created a housing production plan to offer communities below the 40B mandate, the 10% mandate. And again, I apologize if I'm using jargon. Feel free to interrupt me and make sure you know where we're at. But there's a state law that requires 10%.
For the members of the public, I would say, who may be watching on DCAT or YouTube, it would be great if you,
Yeah.
any jargon, if you can just give a quick.
Yeah, and it is a bit of an alphabet soup when we talk about housing, and I apologize for that. So, housing production plan was created by the state to encourage communities to adopt proactive strategies to comply with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40B, which is the state's affordable housing law. That said, many communities that have achieved the 10% continue to use the policy framework and the outline that the state created in that plan scheme just as a general touch point for communities to use as a housing plan. So again, in our case, Danvers has achieved the 10% under the law, but this is a very helpful framework for understanding how to approach the ongoing needs that communities face. Next slide, please. So if we're above 10%, why do it? Again, here are some of the bullet points and reasonings as to why a community would do it. There's also ongoing grant. There are grants out there that having a certified plan on file with the state is, we can only pursue should we have an approved plan. So again, that's another reason why we're pursuing this, is to maintain eligibility for any possible grants that are out there that the community wishes to pursue. And then, again, the planning office isn't opposed to a housing production plan, even though we're above 10%, because in theory, a housing production plan satisfies the state law for what the comprehensive plan. One of the required elements of a comprehensive plan is a housing element, and a housing production plan satisfies that criteria. So it checks several boxes that we want to pursue. Next slide, please. So the background, I had hoped to speak to the board a few months ago. Unfortunately, there's been some internal issues and higher priorities that we've been dealing with, management level things. So I was not able to get you a kind of an earlier version of the background. You saw a version of the plan. But basically, the Affordable Housing Trust has paid for the town to pursue this version of the plan. We did one in 2014 that expired just before COVID. And it's been a couple of years, and the trust decided that they wanted to pursue renewing that plan and have funded that. And so here we are. The draft plan has been put out. It has 4 broad goals and about 19 implementation items, and we'll talk more about those in a moment. Obviously, we have started to receive some feedback. We've had a couple of events. There are some things that people want to learn more about, have more say on, and that's what we're here to do. And at the end of the day, some of those items that we're hearing about are accessory dwelling units, the new state law that mandates all communities in the Commonwealth permit accessory dwelling units in certain situations. That's closely related to an existing process we have on the book called extended family living areas. Those typically would be seen by the Zoning Board of Appeals and not necessarily the Planning Board. But they're closely related, and so we think we have to deal with both of those. And then related to that is dwelling conversions. We authorize currently in the zoning bylaw and have for years. I'll say the subdivision. I don't mean that capital S like I'm cutting up a big property of land, but we allow the building to be subdivided into additional units. If you have so much square footage and so much lot area, you can cut up the old big Victorian into smaller units. We're also starting to see some interesting development pressure around dwelling conversions being used in a way that I don't think town meeting intended when they passed that law. So thinking we may want to throw that into the mix as we talk more about ADUs and EFLAs. And then also in the state law around accessory dwelling units specifically says municipalities may regulate the short-term rentals in accessory dwelling units. And again, not having done a ton of community process around what we would do under this rubric, staff's impression of where we are would be that we would probably move to prohibit short-term rentals in accessory dwelling units moving forward, but that's something that we will have to talk about as we go through this process in deeper detail. So that's a little bit on that.
Currently, any prohibition on short-term rental units?
Currently, the community does not allow short-term rentals, but we have kind of backed into that in that our bylaw, if the zoning bylaw does not say you can do it, you cannot do it. So we're relying on that posture, kind of a reactive posture, and I think it'd be better to have a more proactive statement about what the community's wishes are when it comes to short-term rentals. We probably have, that we are aware of, I'll say maybe 40 to 50 properties that are regularly listed on short-term rental sites. So it's not a huge problem. That balloons a little bit in the fall with the Halloween festivities, but again, it doesn't seem to be a huge problem, but nonetheless, I think this would be a good time and appropriate time to talk about that as it relates to accessory dwelling units and even townwide. So a little bit on, I'm sorry, Josh, if you can go back to that. So the HPP, the development of this plan kicked off late spring last year. We've held a couple of community forums and have done a survey. Survey was not, we didn't get a lot of responses on that, but we did do a survey. Staff is basically, as I say here, technical approval of a housing production plan is the planning board and the board of selectmen. Obviously, we also have that affordable housing trust, which is paid for this initiative. So over the next couple of months, there's going to be a little bit of a dog and pony show as we kind of bounce in between those three boards and kind of triangulate and hone in on final language. And that, again, is the goal, is to get all three boards on the same page and happy and satisfied with the document. And again, I want everyone, there is no rush on this. It doesn't need to be approved tomorrow. It doesn't need to be approved next month. Obviously, I'd like to move things along because there's other work in the queue that we're not going to start until this process is complete. But the board should feel like they have all the time in the world to talk this through. As I said, hopefully we can wrap it up at some point in the near future. But again, take the time we need to do it right is the most important thing. Next slide, please. So I'm going to borrow from the consultant a little bit, the next couple of slides on the plan itself, and then we can jump into questions and answers. So the plan consists of 4 main sections: the housing needs analysis, the development constraints, local capacity, and goals and strategies. And for the most part tonight, I'm going to focus on goals and strategies, although I'm going to fly over a couple of high points in the plan. Next slide, please. So there's, and again, the document is about 120 pages, and there's a whole chapter on the demographics and socioeconomics of the community. I totally geeked out on it. If you came to any of the public sessions or have come to a housing trust meeting where we've talked about it, you'll know that the consultant can't get anything in edgewise because I keep interrupting with all the amazing stats that are in here. But the takeaways are we have an aging population, shrinking household sizes, and the needs, it appears on the numbers based on the census numbers that the need is outstripping the supply. And again, these are largely national and certainly regional trends. Every day there's an article about the lack of affordable housing in the region. So there's nothing exceptional about this. These are broader economic trends that we're facing. Obviously, each community has a nuance to it and how it's experiencing the housing problems. But in theory, at a 30,000-foot level, we're not seeing anything wildly unique about the Danvers experience. Next slide. Again, I think this slide is one of those ones that I kind of geek out on a little bit. What you'll see here is 2 bars. This is the population profile in 2010, and I know it's hard to see. It's in the plan. Happy to give anybody copies. What you see here is 2 bars side by side. The buckets are the age cohorts of the community. The bar on the left is where we were in 2010, 2012, and the bar on the right is where we are in 2022. Generally speaking, you'll see the bar on the right, everything has shifted over. So everybody that was here 10 years ago is still here and has just shifted over 1 bar. Unfortunately, we're not getting any younger, as I'm learning. But in particular, I think if you hone in on a couple of columns in the chart, what I found interesting is what's happening between the 5 and 9 and the 15 and 17. So our youth, our school-aged population. Generally speaking, you're seeing a fairly dramatic decrease in elementary and middle school-aged children, and then an actual slight increase in the high school-aged children. And again, I haven't had the opportunity to do a real deep dive on this, but in a prior community I've worked in, that was actually associated with cost of housing in the community, where barriers to entry or the cost of entry is such that young families that are having the children have yet to be able to get into the community. So what is happening is they're showing up later in their timeline when the kids are a bit older. Similarly, what you're seeing in the middle, the 25 to 44, again, probably a little bit of boomerang happening there. We hear a lot about adult kids coming back to the home. That probably explains the increase in the 25 to 34-year-olds to a point. But it is interesting that you see the 35 to 44-year-old cohort go up so much. And again, in the prior, in another context, that was because it was no longer a first-time home buyer community. You're a second, so you're leveraging your first purchase to come into the community a bit later, and your kids are a bit older. Again, I'm not saying that that's the experience here in Danvers, but the information is tracking pretty well to something that we did in a prior community. And then again, if you look at the 45 to 84 plus, what you'll see is just a massive change in an older cohort. And again, there could be a lot of explanations for that. Obviously, mortgage rates being what they are, it's not a good time to move. So you're kind of going to stay in the home longer until you have a place to land. And that also speaks to the fact of what sort of housing choices do older folks have when they become empty nesters. So it kind of becomes a vicious cycle. But this slide in particular, I think, kind of encapsulates a massive demographic shift that's been happening in the community over the last 10 to 20 years as we get a little bit older. So in particular, again, what this kind of hones in on from an affordable housing need is cost burden. And this is a statistic that is tracked nationally. Cost burden is I think the concept is over 100 years old now of if you're spending more than 30% on your gross income on your housing, you're considered cost burden. And then if we can slide to the next, move to the next slide. So what this slide says is we have about 3,000 households in Danvers that are spending more than a third of their income on their housing. 3,000 households is about, I'll say it's greater than 25% of the households in town. We have about 11,000 households in town. So over 25% of them, 1 in 4, is probably paying more than 30% of their income to afford their housing. This chart in particular highlights 80% AMI households and under. The reason we metric or tie that to the 80% area median income metric is that's the maximum income that the state will consider a unit an affordable unit. So when we talk about Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, the affordable housing law in the Commonwealth, this is the metric that you must supply 10% of your housing stock for 2 households at this level or less. And as we can see, as your income level goes down, you see that those bars continue to move out. Next slide. Thank you, Josh. This is the exact same data, but flipped to actual income. So again, at the state level, we talk about it in percent AMI, but just to kind of give you context as to what it looks like as an income. And so for those that can't see, the qualifying income is about, I'm sorry, I just lost my slide, about 118,000, if I remember correctly. Household income is about 118,000 or less. So, and I apologize tonight, I don't know how that compares to other communities. Again, I wouldn't say, I would be shocked if we were exceptional in that. This is a profile that is fairly common in Eastern Massachusetts at this time. But it is surprising to me that we have about 25% of the population in that category. Okay, so goals and strategies. I was trying to I cut out a lot of the good fun stats, but to try to talk about goals and strategies. So the plan at the moment, these are the 4 goals. Sustain Danvers' current affordable housing portfolio, address town's senior and accessible housing needs, promote housing production that builds local wealth, and leverage key sites for mixed income and affordable housing. That's a lot of gobbledygook. Let me tell you what I think that means. The first goal is we've achieved the 10% requirement under Mass General Law 40B. How do we stay there? Because it's a moving target. Every unit we add means we have to do have some corresponding action on the affordable unit side. The second goal, address town senior and accessible needs. I think, again, our housing supply the housing stock in town doesn't have a lot of options for folks who want to get out of the single-family home. I think we have, again, about a little over 10,000 housing units in town. I want to say about 7,000 of them are single-family homes. So again, there's not, in theory, not a lot of inventory for people that have a different situation or desire a different situation than a single family. Promote housing production that builds local wealth. This is a conversation we've been having at the Affordable Housing Trust for years about how do we do better for those at the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. The state's policy around affordable housing encourages rental housing, and we have pursued that. There's been some conversation at the housing trust level about maybe how do we incentivize or encourage home ownership, affordable home ownership, as the state defines affordable. And that, while the mortgage payments on an affordable home ownership are similar to the rents they would pay in a rental situation, at the end of their tenure, they do get to walk away with a little bit of equity that they gain in that home. And again, the Housing Trust has had a lot of conversation about how to encourage that and see more of that. That's kind of like the Habitat for Humanity model, where you're getting them into the home and giving them a little edge up over time. And we have worked with Habitat quite a bit over the last few years. Final, leveraging key sites for mixed income and affordable housing. You know, essentially, how can the town help facilitate additional production? And I think this could be talking about Endicott Street Corridor. This could be talking about town-owned property that might be able to be repurposed or reused or sold on the market for some sort of development. Again, very high-level conversation about these 4 goals, and I know we'll hear some feedback on these. And again, I will say, as we move forward and talking about the goals and strategies, we're here for the feedback. We're not, you haven't missed anything. The draft only came out, I think, in late January. So again, there's no rush to approve this overnight. If we need to make modifications, that's what the public process piece is for. And I know we've gotten some feedback already, and I anticipate having to make some adjustments as we go forward. So on implementation in particular, the next couple of slides, yep, Josh, one ahead. All right, so about a month ago, we talked about this plan and where we were internally, and on the 19 implementation items, I was so bold as to highlight some of the ones that I thought that we would highlight in particular for further work. I think the first one on the list is has to do with increasing the opportunities for 2 families. We're getting a lot of comments and feedback on that. Again, I look at these 19 things. I understand how they're written in the plan, and I think this is going to be the piece that we're going to have to revisit and reword a little bit based on the feedback. But basically, how I summarize these 19 things is the consultant that we hired to look at our community profile and offer us some proposed solutions to affordable housing or housing affordability. These 19 things are like the buffet. Not everybody is gonna take everything on the buffet. So again, I think the process over the next couple of months as we move from planning board to trust to select board and circle back with everybody, it's which of these 19 things do we think we have consensus to dive into and do further work? I'm just gonna go on a limb and say, I don't think 2 families is gonna get a lot of votes as we go through the process based on what I'm hearing. That's okay, right? We don't have to pursue it, and we could, based on the feedback, we will adjust the language around that as needed. So again, we're here to collect that feedback, but I'll just say I know we've heard a lot about that one. I think, and I apologize, I can't really see the slides. I did not bring my readers with me. Josh, if you could maybe just highlight 3 and 4.
Okay, yep. So the ones you highlighted were develop an accessory dwelling unit regulation in the town zoning that promotes ADU production and consider whether to permit or prohibit their use as short-term rentals.
Yep.
And then the one below it is, it's definitely it's like housing redevelopment combined, like commission a planning study for the Endicott Street corridor, including the Liberty Street Mall area, to create a community-based vision for new zoning and potential future development in the area.
So those are 2 things, obviously, with the ADU law coming online February 3rd, and our zoning bylaw not having an affirmative statement about how we're going to handle that, and having those other creatures that kind of act like ADU-like EFLAs and dwelling conversions, we think that we need to focus on that. And then similarly, we've talked about the Endicott Street corridor for a number of years now, and have, in theory, we're on pace to open up a planning process around Endicott Street corridor before the end of the calendar year expires. Again, we want the feedback. If we've got that wrong, totally okay. It's your community. We're not trying to drive the bus on that. We need your feedback. But I was thinking those are items that I think we have talked about a great deal and have some consensus on. Josh, if you can move ahead one slide.
Yeah, I could do the highlighted
Sorry.
ones.
Do we want to, yep. Mr. George, may I take a question from the audience? Or should I?
Yeah, so if there's a question, clarify. Yeah.
Yep.
So the question is in terms of what exactly is the Endicott Street corridor? What does it encompass?
Excellent, yep. The commercial 3 zoning district spans Hutchinson Drive, BJ's, and the medical center there, all the way down to basically Sylvan Street Grill, and then reaches into the mall property and the Home Depot, and a little bit on the other side of the street where Bed Bath & Beyond used to be in 152 Endicott Street. Thinking that area, again, we get a lot of comments from the condition of the roads, from it's not firing on all cylinders. What can we do there? And I think we've talked about that for a couple of years now, and I think there's seems to be mostly nodding of heads when people say, yeah, I don't think that's firing on all cylinders. What can we do? Maybe there's nothing we can do, but we should probably talk about it as a group. On the next slide, Josh, if you could
Yeah.
read 9 and 10
Yeah.
for me, I apologize.
Yeah. No, it's on support home repairs and retrofits for income-eligible households in Danvers, helping seniors and people with disabilities to remain in the community. That was number 9. And then number 10, create a local preference policy for new affordable units created through inclusionary zoning and comprehensive permits.
So really pleased on number 9, support local homeowners with home modifications. The Housing Trust, during the course of this year and this planning process, not this year, I guess it was 2024, created a partnership with Habitat, which is headquartered just down the street, on a home maintenance program. It's called the Critical Care Program. Habitat used to run this pre-COVID, and for a variety of reasons, that program kind of mothballed for a couple of years, and we've been working with them to reawaken that. And the Affordable Housing Trust has seeded the Danvers program with $50,000. They typically, a home modification runs around $10,000, and so far I think we've had 2 come through the system in the last 6 months, so we're off to a good start on that item, and that was highlighted anyway, but the fact that the Housing Trust has already started to implement that is wonderful, and we're really excited about the early launch to that. And then number 10, create a formal local preference policy. So whenever a private development is required to provide an inclusionary unit, which under the terms of our affordable housing provisions in the zoning bylaw is almost every type of development, almost every time. If they are triggering the creation of a unit, they must go through a affordable housing lottery process. And we could, and we have, but we're doing it on a one-off basis, we could draft a broader community statement about local preference that those developers would have to use in their lottery process that would, again, like I said, we're doing that as a one-off as we can currently, but there is a stronger policy avenue we could take to ensure that all of the affordable housing lotteries in town are taking advantage of the local preference policy. Moving ahead. We're almost there.
Nothing's highlighted.
Nothing's highlighted. If
Yep,
we can
so maybe
move
keep-
ahead.
Keep going, okay.
And again, I don't mean to gloss over the other 19 things. I'm happy to double back. I was just thinking that, as we talk about what are we going to do, are we going to do all these 19 things? I don't want this plan because I don't like number 18. Just trying to, we're now talking about how to hone this list down.
So number
Josh, if you could highlight 15, 16,
So
and
15 is
19.
identify a monitoring agent for the town's affordable housing stock, ensuring that units remain available at prices consistent with town and state regulations. Number 16, convene a housing roundtable consisting of representatives from town boards and committees and other housing-related organizations to build consensus and further address the housing affordability in town. And number 19, advocate for the restoration of MBTA transit service in downtown Danvers.
So I'll start with the last one first. Again, since the inception of this planning process, we have had very productive conversations with the MBTA about restoration of service to downtown. The work we have done through the MBTA's Act, we leveraged the community's hard work into a conversation, and we're not able to tell you that we've achieved the restoration of service, but we are having conversations with the T about routing and what that'll look like. And in my opinion, if they were going to tell us no, they should have done that a while ago, because we are definitely talking about how to do this and wake the service back up, which I think is a great thing for the community. The number 15, identifying a monitoring agent for the town's affordable housing stock. So one thing that you see is once you get to 10%, is the monitoring of the existing affordable housing units in town is a little bit catch as catch can. And there are stronger programs out there to make sure that we don't have any issues within that housing portfolio. And again, a private developer could screw something up, and who pays the price? The community, because the units come off the list if the developer's not adhering to the state rules for the affordable housing. So there is, in theory, some interest in the community to ensure that private operators of affordable housing units that we need for that credit are doing so on the up and up. And again, generally, just like everyone else, not everyone's an expert in affordable housing. And so again, this is kind of a third party to kind of help us keep an eye on them. And that's an expertise that we do not have on staff. Jumping to number 16, the housing roundtable. Again, I think that that's just a good idea for an organization of our size, with the number of disparate boards we have and the public that is involved in affordable housing. You know, this would include the Housing Authority, maybe the Senior Center. Again, we have lots of social service agencies that I think a housing roundtable is a good idea to do once or twice a year. So those were the 19 things, and the 5 or 6 that I highlighted of the 19. And again, I know people are going to have a lot of comments and concerns and feedback, and we're here for that. And again, based on your questions, I am likely to return to a future meeting with our planning consultant. I figured tonight I would try to answer any procedural questions, because the consultant costs a lot of money and the procedural stuff is ours. If there's subject matter questions that I can't address, we'll get those answers to you next time, and we'll bring the project team to a future meeting so that they can address those questions to you.
Great.
So with that, I'll do what I can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And so, I think what we'll do is let's get some, questions and comments from members of the board. And we do have members of the public here as well. So once we've had some questions from members of the board, I'll turn it over to any public questions as well. And just in terms of procedurally, before I go there, I guess just a question I have, I know you said we have disparate boards here, and we have, we have planning board. This is ultimately going to go before select board. It's going to go before housing trust. I know, for example, when you have a zoning article going before a town meeting, we know there's a specific, what happens in terms of that, who gets, in essence, approval authority, or what ends up, sometimes something gets changed or something drops. So how does this work in terms of, since we have different parties? Because we could, for example, planning board may say, look, we agree with all of your highlighted points, but then select board may have a different view, or housing trust may have a different view, either less or more.
That's the fun part. We got to have that conversation and the reconciliation amongst everybody, and hopefully we can arrive at a consensus document.
Okay.
Like I said, we have no time constraints on that conversation. So again, we'll give everybody the space, the time and space they need to work through it.
Okay, sounds good. Turn to members of the board with questions?
I have
Sure.
questions. Go
You
ahead.
want to start?
Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Rock, paper, scissors. You go
No, no,
first.
go ahead. He said Tim.
All right.
He said
So,
Tim, not Jim.
can you help orient me? Because this is a housing production plan. You said this is part of a comprehensive plan, correct?
Could be.
Could
It
be.
is.
So, what is a comprehensive plan?
I can't remember the state law that the comprehensive plans are outlined in. I want to say it's chapter something. It's the subdivision control law, chapter 81L or 81M. But basically, it requires every community in the Commonwealth to have a comprehensive plan. There's no penalty if you don't, but it's just basically we wish you did. And a comprehensive plan has 7 statutory sections in that plan. Housing element is one of those plans. A housing production plan qualifies as that. If you have a housing production plan, you can check the box on your comprehensive plan that you have one.
Tim, it's also often called or referred to as the master plan for
Yeah, I
community.
am setting you up a little bit because I do know what it is. We don't have one, correct?
We do not have one.
We've never had one.
The town has had various long-range.
In a very long time, we haven't had one.
Correct.
Probably since I've been alive.
Probably.
It seems a little backwards to me because the master plan, as I understand it, sets a sort of long-term vision, correct? For what we want for development in the town. So it seems a little backwards to me to be thinking about housing production without alignment on the long-term vision of what we actually want as a town.
Understand what you're saying. We've just done.
Because I think we're going to get up here, we're going to hear a lot
Strategic
of differing opinions about this problem. I have my opinion. I'm sure other people have their opinions, but we don't have one opinion represented as a living document that guides this board and the decisions we're supposed to make. That seems like a problem to
And
me.
we're not proposing a comprehensive plan. I'm just saying that what it could be an element or a chapter in a master plan. We're not proposing that, but we do happen to have an open space plan under development right now, and we're working on a transportation needs analysis, which could, depending on what we find, morph into that. But we are not proposing devising a comprehensive plan. What we are basing a lot of this work on is Strategic Danvers, which was a plan that the town did a couple of years ago. Resilient Danvers, again, where we've had lots of conversations with the community about what they're looking for, and we're trying to pull all of these threads together in a document like this. So we've looked at Resilient Danvers, we've looked at Strategic Danvers, and trying to make sure this plan is in alignment with those. Obviously, two-family homes was not mentioned in Strategic Danvers, so again, we're kind of in the deep end on this subject matter. But I hear what you're saying, but again, we are hoping to pursue the housing production plan so that we can have an approved plan on file with the state, so that if a year from now we want to go after certain grants or do something, we have the eligibility, the prerequisites out of the way to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I just would like this to be part of a discussion for what our plan is to get a master plan. I think that's very important. And just to sort of solve one fire because it's in front of us rather than thinking about the big picture and having, okay, this is a great step. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad it's paid for. I know we need it. Let's keep going. Like, what does that look like? I think that would be helpful, just big picture. One thing I wanted to touch on specifically, so for the ADUs that you mentioned, I don't fully understand, so this time I'm not setting you up. Yep. The state has passed this law, it says we have to require it in certain circumstances. Do we have to react in order to comply, or does it overrule us in some way?
We do not, but I guess unfortunately with zoning, it's never like just this issue, right? You do authorize ADUs, and now you've screwed up 3 other things. Yep. So what we need, in my opinion, to deal with is, now that ADUs are allowed, and there's nothing we can do about that, how do EFLAs work in relation to that? How do dwelling conversions work in relation to that?
Mm-hmm.
How do short-term rentals? Do we want to do short-term rentals? So again, unfortunately, and we had provided comments to the state saying we wish they had delayed the implementation of this law so that communities, because I don't know too many that are in a situation where they're ready to have this dropped into their zoning bylaw, we made the comment to them, like, you got to give us time to straighten out the rest of the book, because we now have inconsistencies. Come to the counter, you can do an EFLA, you can do an ADU, you can do this. We would like to try to make sense of that. And we with the MBTA Communities Act, they gave us a year and a half to try to come up with a plan before the law went into effect. We thought they were going to do something similar with ADUs and give us that time. They did not.
What'd they say?
The law went into effect
No, but you
on
said, yeah,
February 3rd. I
Right.
mean, yeah, they gave us a 6-month warning, but that whole time,
Right.
the state agency in charge of that was hemming and hawing about whether they were going to issue regulations, whether they were going to delay implementation of the law, such that communities were kind of stuck betwixt and between. But ultimately, they chose to issue regulations, but not hold up the implementation date of February 3rd.
You said something that was interesting to me about the reactive posture of our bylaw. You said something about if we don't explicitly say something's allowed,
It's
we
not
assume it's not.
Correct.
Is that a tested legal theory? That seems odd to me.
No, that's not every zoning bylaw out there has that trait.
Yeah.
Ours does. Most communities, all the communities I've worked in have that trait where unless we tell you you can do it, you cannot do it.
From a use perspective, you
From
mean?
in the use
Like
table.
the
right.
use table.
Oh.
If it's not in the use table, you
Use
can't do
table.
it.
Got
So
it.
in the rear of the book,
So
the 50 items.
ADUs are kind of now in a gray area because
Yeah.
they're not in the use table, but they're allowed under state law. So we've been, short-term rentals didn't exist in the zoning bylaw whenever that table of uses, I think, was last adjusted in 2007, I think. That's the Evan
It was,
Belansky. I know that was,
it was created.
yeah, created in
used to be-
2007 off of text. That wasn't a thing then. And so our book is silent to it. There was a nearby community that had almost the same exact language as we have in our zoning bylaw. They prevailed in a court case. So we are relying on that court case and the similarity of their bylaw and our bylaw as our enforcement mechanism.
Got it.
Not the best place to be. I
Yeah.
would rather have an affirmative statement that we can point to.
Yeah, makes sense. So you sort of teed yourself up for being the procedural person. So this is obviously a huge document, really interesting topic, 19 different things to react to. We don't want to keep everyone here till 3 a.m. So do you have a rough sense for like how many more times we'll get to talk about this, hear from the public, opine, edit, things like that?
Again, absent the conversation, and again, in 10 minutes, I could give you a very different answer. But as I speak, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, whatever it takes to work through. I think a lot of it, in my opinion, is restructuring the goals and objective section of the plan. Maybe phrasing things a little bit differently within that plan, making it clear that the community may not be looking to implement all 19 things out of the gate, exploring other things with more, needing more time to explore other options. But then this kind of goes back to the high level comment we made before, where Board of Selectmen may have a totally different take, and the Housing Trust, which is paying for the plan, may have a completely different take. So time will tell, but my hope was that each board will need about 2 or 3 meetings to kind of reconcile. We'll be sharing drafts, going back and forth. That's the plan, but
And is it right that the plan is essentially, because some of it does involve things that would, such as zoning bylaw amendments, which would need to come through the planning board.
Yep.
So that is not this is a recommendation, right?
correct.
We recommend X, and then the follow-up is planning board actually has to debate.
Correct. And I think that's been a big hesitancy, is people assuming, like, the first draft, like, oh my God, this is it. No, it's not it. We can work on this, we can massage it, and we can hopefully get to that consensus.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Maybe the last point I'll make is, a lot of the statistics about socioeconomic sort of disparities and the increasing income and asset inequality in our town are a little disturbing, and I think everyone who's bought a house recently, has a mortgage, watched interest rates go up, sort of understand what's happening. I'll say that it's, I think we should be bold and creative in the way we think about solutions here, so I'm happy to see so many things to pick from, and happy the planning board gets to work on a lot of things. I'll say that the other thing that's sort of concerning for me, right, is almost everyone here, like, we actually benefit a lot from a small, constrained supply of housing. My housing property's gone up a lot since I've lived here. I borrowed on it, got a home equity line of credit, put solar panels on my roof, look at me. doing nothing, just making money sitting here because no one else gets to afford to come here, and so my asset keeps getting more and more expensive. So I think there's a perverse incentive for us to not solve this problem, that we all have to sort of look inward and say, this is a bigger problem. This is all of Massachusetts. It's a great state to live in, increasingly hard to live here. The income inequality issue, the housing affordability issue is not going anywhere, and inequality is not a sustainable game. I might be benefiting now, but if my town craters because no one wants to work and live here, then it won't be very valuable soon. So I'm excited to work on this. Thanks.
So just at the outset, my initial question, before I delve into the topic, is being on the board since the 90s, every time we've done any type of planning, the planning staff has been great and able to get us grants and pay for consultants. Why does the Danvers Affordable Housing Trust have to use their money to quote-unquote pay for this consultant, where we've got millions of dollars in our budget, in our general fund, and we've got a selectman here, why are they paying for it? Why are they using their money that could be used to help people get housing to pay for the consultant? Why don't we pay for the consultant or apply for a grant?
It was identified as a priority by the trust, but I will get a deeper answer. I'll be at their meeting next week. We can flesh that out a little bit, but I think they felt a strong need for a planning document. At the moment, there wasn't a grant opportunity for this at the time that we were doing this. But
How much are we talking about?
It's about $50,000.
We can't find that in our budget for 2025, maybe, and reimburse them?
Our consultant budget is less than half of that, and a fair chunk
We've
of that is
gotten
spoken
six
for.
figures in consultants for grants for the downtown alone. We've got tens and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of consultants. We've sat here for 26 meetings. So
Understood.
it seems odd to me that they have to use their money to pay for this thing that's going to benefit our town and promote affordable housing. So I think we need to look into that and see if we can reimburse them, because I think it's crazy to have them use their money, which is going to benefit the town. And I think the town can well afford that. The town has a general fund. The town has different funds that they can look at. The town gets a majority of their, budget to education, and I think this is going to promote opportunities in the town. So maybe we could have a initiative at town meeting to get them reimbursed.
Okay.
But let me get into the
Yeah.
the issues I have at hand, the questions I have. The biggest thing I think, talking to people about this, and having to keep the town at above their 10% limit, and we did talk about this, some members of the audience addressed this last week. If we're encouraging more development, not necessarily building more homes, but maybe detached or improving an existing, split. I live in a split. There's a lot of splits in town, and making that an accessory dwelling unit. Not an affordable dwelling unit,
Right.
but an accessory dwelling unit. I think the state might have missed the mark here in that they're making them accessory and not requiring them to be affordable. So there's no limit on people saying, hey, I can get $2,000 a month for a studio. If I put a 900 square foot unit, make my basement that, and I can put 2 or 3 bedrooms in there, maybe I get more money. Maybe I might think about doing affordable, but I'm not required to do affordable. So what happens is,
About doing it affordably.
what happens is, now, after you expend the money to do that, now your denominator of houses increases,
Correct.
but your numerator of affordable
Correct.
houses
It's terrible.
stays the same. So it seems like a crazy idea,
Yeah.
and now our 10% is going to go down to 8 or 6 or 7. So now we go from a
Try
town
not
of
to.
28,000 people, and if half the 11,000 households wanted to do this, now we're going to have 40,000 people. We have people that come to a meeting on Chatham Lane with 6 lots complaining like they always do. What's going to happen to the water? There's not going to be any more water in town. Water's going to disappear. It's all going to dry up. What about the schools? 6 houses, that means, 5 more students. Maybe, I don't know. What about traffic? Traffic is going to go bananas.
The state just doubled the density of the entire
It
common.
doesn't make sense.
Understand.
How does it make sense? Explain to me how it makes
You're
sense.
asking me to tell you what the legislature.
I
I-
would love to have this consultant that another town board is paying $50,000 to come to our board and explain it.
Well, it's not Jim, it's not the housing consultant that adopted the law.
I know. Someone needs to explain this law and how we can implement it. How do we track it? We talked about tracking it.
We track it.
Right now in Danvers, I had a 4-family home. The only thing they do for a 4-family home is every 5 years, they come out and inspect it, make sure you got smoke detectors and CO detectors and 2 egresses. They barely go in the units. A lot of cities and towns like Beverly and Salem require you every time you turn over a rental unit to pay $50 and have it inspected. So are we going to hire new inspectors for the town to manage that, right? Because we got to put these numbers on the books. We got to put these units, whether they're affordable, accessory, or whatever they are, 2 families all over town, we got to count them, right? Because we want to tax them. We want to make sure they're legal. Now we're going to have a very busy infrastructure department where we're going to be adding, we have to add water and sewer, right, to that 900 square foot unit? So we're going to be,
I mean,
That's be a
Yeah,
separate.
separate.
yeah, they have to.
so
have
now
separate-
we're going to be doing a lot of digging in the street. So we're going to have a lot of little pavement
Trenching.
areas where we're going to be bringing the separate water and sewer service in. And we're going to be bringing separate more electric lines to the house, right? That's what we need. So just picture it. Residence 2, Residence 3, Residence 1A. All these areas of towns where people complain about parking and density and schools and water. We're going to, by law, we can do it. All we need to do is get a building permit if we're going to add a structure or improve upon the existing structure, maybe to add a second egress to that existing space. So really, very little
Well, they're pulling building, I
inspection
mean, you
involvement.
need to pull a building permit to create a new unit. So
Yeah.
To add a door in your split?
it's
Well, it's
going to
gonna be more than
it's
that.
not, this is not an EFLA. This
No,
has
but
to
what do
be
we-
fully
what-
compliant under the building code. So fire separation between units, 2
Okay.
forms of access egress
Yep.
for every unit.
It will need a
Right.
CO.
We've already had
For utilities.
2 or 3 apply.
Okay.
And we're working through, of course, they were all the most complicated ones you could imagine right
Right.
out of the gate, which I think is a harbinger
it's
of
worth
things
it.
to come.
If you can get
For those
3,000 a
property
month,
owners.
it's worth it
Sure,
for that unit or more,
sure.
because that's the going rate.
And again, I
And
will
those
say,
are not affordable.
speaking for myself, not for the planning staff, not for, I mean, we are right now applying the law as strictly as we can. The state law says what we have to allow and what we don't have to allow. If we develop a bylaw around this, there are some minor things that we can add to the process that we probably should. But I hear what you're saying, Jim. It's a state law. I mean, I can't help you with most of what you just said are
Yeah.
issues we are lamenting every day. The building code issues associated with all of this. It is, the state did this. We need to deal with it. And that's why I think we need to address a few things, what we can, and try to clean this up as best as possible. And what the community wants to do with that, that's what we will have to engage as we go forward over the next, 9 to 12 months.
You talk about in your plan, your wish list of subsidizing affordable housing. How would you do that other than the limited funds that the Affordable Housing
I'm not sure I.
Trust has? How, in your checklist there?
Sorry, one of
You-
the things at the end.
One of
Sorry,
the things
Jim.
that I highlighted.
Yeah, that you want to subsidize affordable housing. Is that?
Subsidize the creation and preservation of
So you're
affordable-
gonna pay
by private
me to make my 900 square foot unit and somehow keep it affordable?
I don't.
How do you
I
subsidize
don't have any
it?
ideas on. I mean, I.
No,
don't have
you're the
any-
one, it's
I'm
part of
trying-
your, it's part of your plan,
Aaron,
to
Aaron,
subsidize
I
it.
could read it for
Yeah.
clarification. subsidize the creation and preservation of affordable housing by supporting private developers of affordable housing in town.
So if I'm a private developer,
Again,
and
this is the draft, the first draft from
no,
the
I'm
consultant.
not trying
says
to be
that.
argumentative. I'm
No,
just
I
saying,
know.
how do we, where do you get the funds to subsidize it and support it if a private developer?
We get payment in lieu of funds through the affordable housing provision. So the zoning bylaw has a payment in lieu of function for small projects that don't create a unit they can pay into. I think you've seen a few projects come through the planning board.
But
that
if we're
have
just
opted for
doing
that.
one-offs, we're doing less than 5 units or 4 units.
Right, so you have a payment in lieu of, so
Yeah.
Development A does a project, 5 units, they owe us $72,000 for their payment in lieu of. That 72,000 in theory could become available for the town to leverage something else that gets that fraction back, right? We're gonna take your 72 and that person's 72 and leverage a condo buy down somewhere else in town and get a unit on the,
But on a small level, on the
Numerator.
smaller ADU level,
yeah, on the,
on the 1 unit that you're
it's
adding.
going to be very difficult, and the state has said you can't require ADUs to be affordable units. An owner could choose to deed restrict an accessory dwelling unit.
That's not a very likely outcome, but they have the
Right, I think the economics of it are, why would they do that unless they're independently wealthy and are just trying to be a do-gooder? I think the economics of it would.
But that's not part of the bylaw, like the EFLA
Correct, and
bylaw
we can't
requires
require
it.
them to do that. So no, it's a conundrum. And I think that actually underscores the importance of having a housing plan, because we now have a new force on the scene creating new units every year that are going to be unaccounted for in the numerator. So we have to figure this out and how we want to offset these. For background, today we permit about 10 to 12 EFLAs a year. ADUs are more involved than EFLAs. EFLAs aren't technically separate units, so there's no fire separation necessary. So the build out is a little bit easier. ADUs are going to require an investment on behalf of the property owners. So I don't know that we will see 10 to 12 a year, but again, you know the economics better than I do of what's out there in the real estate market. My guess is having the ability to sell a condo for $500,000 is a motivating factor. And that we could see more people use this along the lines of the EFLA. So 10 to 12 a year, maybe. I don't have a crystal ball, but
How do you deal with the EFLA deed restriction? How do you remove that?
again, we have to have a conversation about what the community wants to do. There could be a version, an alternative universe where EFLAs remain on the books post whatever we're doing with ADUs.
So if you approved my EFLA 5 years ago and it's 1,500 square feet,
right?
Yep.
how does that fit the?
Today, you're legal. But what you do not have is a protected accessory dwelling unit under the chapter of whatever that law. I apologize, I don't know the MGL site for the new accessory dwelling law, but that is a thing that exists. So if you have an EFLA today and we leave it on the books, you're conforming EFLA. Although most of the time when we learn about EFLAs, it's because they're no longer compliant.
But that EFLA requires me to rent it to a family member.
Correct.
Right.
So now my family member moves out and I rent it to anyone off the street. Am I out of compliance?
Yes.
How would you know?
Because your neighbor told me that you're renting to some stranger, and then we've witnessed that and we start the process. Last
So
year,
you've got how many EFLAs in town?
Total?
Yeah.
Couple
That you know
hundred?
of?
Well, like you said,
couple hundred in the books.
if it's 10 or 12, 10 to 15 a year.
And we have a tracking sheet.
Yeah, we do actually.
We
I
have a
think-
tracking
yeah, I
sheet
think there was
on
a-
all of them.
So we're gonna have a monitoring agent. We're gonna have a new sheriff in town. And we're gonna look for these, because let's
Not
face it, human
necessarily.
nature is,
Yeah.
if you have an opportunity to make money, you're gonna make money.
Yep.
So if grandma moves out and goes to the nursing home,
Right, but
I'm renting that unit.
I guess the comment I think I heard from the Hoek that can, I mean, not that we are advocating for it, but that situation can occur right now. It's hard for us, for every life circumstance or experience to like monitor and all of that. So I hear what you're saying. Obviously, there will always be people that like take advantage of anything that we're
But
doing.
how does the town fix it so that we
Well,
can
when,
So
make?
there-
when
so if I've
someone,
got
when
that-
we learn
It's
about
a,
it.
it's a
and-
building or a vote.
But I
dive
mean,
in.
I'm not trying to be,
No, I-
I'm not trying to be
no, it's an
violating
important
the
question.
spirit of the law.
Yeah.
So I have my 1,500 square foot detached EFLA.
Yep.
That's been approved.
Yep.
That I paid money to get approved by
Yep.
the town, did the plans, built it and all that.
You even have a deed restriction on that.
I get it all
Yep,
the
it's all
prop,
there.
proper
Yep.
way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now my son or daughter or parent is moving out.
Mhm.
Yep.
So for me to comply, do I have to board up 600 square feet of that unit?
You can either reincorporate it back into the house.
But it's
and-
attached, it's attached.
Yeah, but I mean, they, you know, if you put the kitchenette in and you don't want the kitchenette in anymore because you're going to take the space back.
No, but I want to take advantage of this ability to rent now to a third party.
So,
So
again,
how do I
turn it into an
conform?
ADU?
you
No.
will not be able,
Because you're above the 900.
you
right?
will, not every EFLA is going to be easily convertible to an ADU.
Yeah.
Because of fire separation and the way that those EFLA units are created within the dwelling. Again, you may have, I'm just trying to think of a what if, a detached garage that was converted to the man cave, maybe that could satisfy both.
Yeah.
And if that were the case, you came in and affirmatively wanted to take it out of EFLA status and into an ADU status, we'd have to have that conversation and look at your setbacks and all of that fun stuff that the ADUs must comply with. And if we can check all of the boxes on the ADU side, then you'd have an ADU under the new state law. Otherwise, right now, you have to operate your EFLA under the terms of the local bylaw.
Right.
And those could continue parallel forever. I just think, again, as the community has this conversation and starts to come to grips with what the ADU law authorizes, my guess is you don't need 4 other mechanisms to create units shotgun style anywhere in the community at any time with very little control. So my guess is, for better or for worse, ADUs, we need to get all those other things under control, dwelling conversions. And again, the community may have the conversation and say, we're fine as is. I just think it's a good time to have that conversation about all of these various issues. Because from what I prefer to do is, when we're making a zoning change, you want to have something of a build-out analysis of the new law. Like, what is this going to do? With ADUs, we can't really tell you. I mean, I don't want to be sensational, but basically, if you can do a single-family home, you can do an ADU. So it's doubling the density of the town.
Wouldn't you
Dwelling
run into
conversions, I
issues
don't know.
with number of bedrooms, parking issues? Because if you went to 2 families in every zoning district
Yep.
except for Residence 1,
Which
you
already
know.
allows them. I mean,
Okay.
we already have 2 families by right in R1.
but if I'm now making my 1 family into a 2 family,
Yeah.
right? Are you going to
Are you
limit?
doing an ADU, or are you
I'm
trying
doing
to-
ADU.
Sorry, yep.
Let's say we do the ADU. I'm not limited in the number of bedrooms,
That's right.
so I could put 3 bedrooms in there.
If you can jam in
Yep,
3 bedrooms in a 900 square foot
Yep,
space
sure.
and meet building code,
yep.
you could do that.
But what about,
And it's gross floor area with ADUs, and that's something this town doesn't usually get down to that level of measurement.
yep,
But again, strict compliance with the law, we are using gross floor area for ADUs. So if you got a crawl space, not a crawl space, because that's not a biddable space, but, so we're trying to, we are administering this as strictly as we can.
say I did 2 bedrooms,
Yep,
and there's 2 couples that are living there,
yep,
and I have my own house.
yep.
Now you've got issues with number of unrelated people living in a dwelling. Now you've got issues of how many cars are you going to have? How much parking can you have? There's just so many issues
Yep.
that I see that would, you need a full-time staff person. In my mind, if people are going to, if this takes off the way the state wants it to, and we want to encourage more and more building or more housing, how are we going to manage this? It just seems that if we're going to limit, like right now, you can only have up to,
Yep.
what, 7 people in a dwelling, or is it unrelated people, or maybe it's less than that?
I think
There's a
it's
bylaw on that.
4, you can have no more
Four-
than 4
Four
unrelated,
unrelated.
if I'm right.
4 unrelated. So I've got my family of 4 in my house, and then I have this
So it's a
900.
separate unit, so
Yep.
each unit can have
So we can have 4 unrelated people in there.
Yep, you can have 4 unrelated in the ADU, and
Okay.
however many
And
in
so
the
how many
principal.
cars can I have?
There's-
I can
mean-
have 10 cars in the driveway or on the
I mean-
front of the house.
I mean, you could, there's no limit on cars for any,
Right,
any-
we don't
right-
regulate
right now-
parking for single families, and so that's the trick
Well,
of
you
the law.
regulate parking for 2 families.
Here's-
and 3
the
families,
law-
4 families.
The law around accessory dwelling units says if you don't do it for single-family homes, you cannot do it for accessory dwelling units. So I've worked in communities that do site plan approval for every single-family home.
Yeah.
If you want to regulate it for ADUs, you need to start regulating it for single-family homes. My guess is there's not enough runway in the near term to have that conversation about going to that extent in the near term. I don't think this community wants to hear site plan review for single-family homes at this time. So unless and until we want to get crazy and go down that road, we've got to, whatever we do for single families is the same rules for ADUs. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying I condone it. I'm telling you that is the law, and staff is trying to enforce this as strictly as possible because there are a lot of unintended consequences associated with this. The state did not think through,
Nope.
and we have to figure that out.
Yeah, I can just see a parking on the denser areas of town. A parking issue, traffic issue, again, the whole gamut of issues.
No, I think and again, like I said, we commented to the state that we felt that a cooling off period or whatever, some implementation period like they did for the MBTA Community Acts would have been helpful because again, this touches across so many processes. To your point, involves building permits. These are by right. They're not coming to the planning board. They're not, so we have to invent a process internally. We've been working on that, and I think we have it, and we've already got 2 or 3 in the system, and those have been very difficult to move through because of all of the issues you're raising about what can we do, what can we require, and that there's no answers at the state level. My guess is we'll see the first court case out of this within 9 months. And I hope it's not Danvers, and that we can learn from that experience as to how to apply it to our community. That's how this is going to work, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if for some reason the interest rates come down, I mean,
Yep.
historically, when we were at 2 or 3%,
Yeah.
we thought, we'll probably never see that again in our lifetime, but you never know, right? Say they come down to 3%.
Right.
Now people can get basically
Correct.
free money.
Yep.
So now I'm gonna do that extra building.
In-
Now maybe you get the developer that's gonna say, okay, even though I gotta pay a ton of money to build in downtown Danvers for this MBTA zone, maybe I stop building a few of these. And now they start building. So now we've got increased housing downtown, increased housing in all the neighborhoods. So now our town could double in size. And we haven't really, we've become a city. And I'm not sure that's what we want. But
Again, that's the
that's
part of the
what-
conversation that we can have
that's
around this.
definitely
Again,
what could definitely happen, and we're opening the door to that.
Again, I hear what you're saying, Jim, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. We've had 2 game-changing state laws in the last couple of years put on the community, and the communities of the Commonwealth have to figure out how to work with that law. And, we're local staff, and that's what we're here to try to help navigate the community through that process.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Jean? Any questions or comments?
We've covered a lot.
I know,
I guess,
covered a lot.
Aaron, is there any sort of, have you talked to other communities to see what everyone else is doing? Because we're not the only people that are
Oh,
facing
no,
this
yeah.
problem.
Oh,
So,
the chatter is
there must be some sort of
nonstop.
knowledge sharing going on, right? Okay.
Lots of that.
So at least we have that.
Lots of that.
And then is there a way that we can, if people are applying for these ADUs through building permits, have them dedicate funds to the Affordable Housing
No.
Trust? No.
If we don't do it for a single family, if we wouldn't do it for the development of a single family, we cannot do it for an ADU.
Okay. I don't think I have anything
Again, I
else
think
right now.
unfortunately, we're gonna have to wait and see how different communities roll this out. I know Middleton recently went, I think they put a height restriction on their ADU bylaw, and it'll be interesting to see what the Attorney General's office does with that. So again, I think we're gonna start seeing what communities are doing over the next couple of months, and shortly thereafter, we're gonna start seeing the court cases. And then maybe we'll get a little bit of color on exactly what we can do around this issue.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
A lot of my questions are answered, so I just want to say thank you for the presentation. And then just one quick question was, when building permits for the ADUs are filed, are they noted specifically
Yeah.
that it's an ADU?
So-
Okay.
In our permitting system, you can apply for a residential permit, a commercial building permit, and there's a couple flavors. We have a flavor for accessory dwelling unit, just so that the tracking and reporting out of these are a little bit easier.
So Josh, I guess question for you, when we get our update with the different reports, is it noted in there when someone applies for a building permit that there's an ADU? Just so we can be
It would
knowledgeable
in
about
that,
it?
in your monthly development
That's what I'm
update,
asking. Does it note ADU,
it'd
or
be in
is
the
it-
sheet behind. It wouldn't be necessarily noted, although we can add this if this is a
Yeah.
desire of the board. We're happy to modify the form, but in theory, you'd only see the ADUs in the list of actual permits pulled for the last month. So if I'm not mistaken, you get a two-sheeter that has what all the boards and committees are up
Like,
to.
it's usually one.
And
yeah,
then
but-
an attachment that's just a run of the building permits issued over the last 30 days. It would be in there as ADU dash
Yep.
25 dash whatever, but, so you could see that quickly, but if you would like us to highlight accessory dwelling unit permits going out the door on the monthly report, in the actual one pager, happy to do that.
Yeah, I know we might have a lot more in the future, but I personally think it would be nice just so I can be a little more knowledgeable about them, and I notice it when I look at it. But if other people think that's a nuance, like too much information, that's okay with me too. But
I mean, it's a new and novel kind of
And the
thing,
more
so it might
information,
be
the
worth highlighting, at least in the near term, as we kind of
just
get
to
our
stay
heads-
knowledgeable as
Yeah.
we move forward. So
Yep.
that's all I have. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Right. Just a couple of questions I have, and I know, and fellow board members have touched upon a lot of this, concerns that I had, and thanks for the presentation. I won't speak too long, because I know we have members of the public here, so I want to be respectful of their time as well. So, in terms of I guess in terms of sort of what we can do, in terms of sort of how ADUs fit into all this, and I guess in terms of I guess the question I have, and this is probably something for when the consultant comes, we can ask, and I know ADUs were mentioned in the report, but so I guess in terms of they were aware of the law, the recommendations that came in took the ADU piece into consideration, or
Yeah,
not?
I didn't have a chance. We spoke earlier in the week about this topic.
Yeah.
Reached out to the consultant. I did get an answer, or at least a response
Sure.
from that. I would like to follow up with them verbally just to better understand.
Sure.
But yes, they have considered that to some degree. I think, again, based on community feedback, I think we need to have another go-around on how we phrase that in the plan. But yeah, I got a preliminary response, and they were aware of the ADU law and what that would mean
Right.
vis-a-vis their recommendations.
And one question in terms of sort of the need, and I think no one's doubting the need, but one question I had in terms of affordability of housing, there was, you saw the, separate tables in terms of age, you had separate tables in terms of income, those who are paying more than a third for their housing. Was that broken down by age as well? Because you definitely hear a lot of stories of people like, my kids can't afford to
Yeah.
live in Danvers, or oftentimes
I
it's
don't
the.
recall if we, in any of the reports or presentations, if we broke it out that way, but I know we can get the data broken out that way. The census information
Yeah,
can
I was
be,
I was
can be
interested
cut
in
that way.
knowing
So
that.
in your case, what do you think those cohorts would be? 65 plus,
Right, and then the younger.
and then maybe
And
20,
younger, yeah.
18 to 25, just,
Yeah,
is that the
25 to
kind of?
34, getting into the, in terms of ages. I know even in our neighborhood, we live, near, near Plains Park, and there's just, there was a house that was for sale, that's currently one
It
up
was
for
a
sale.
traffic problem.
It was like a traffic problem. There's so many people,
Oh, really?
so many people there, and a lot of, feel like an old guy, a lot of younger people there looking at places, and so obviously there's a need, so I was kind of, I'm just kind of interested in seeing where that is.
So I'm writing that down as, can we cut the demographics by cohort,
Yeah.
by age cohort?
And I'm also interested too in knowing, you know, talking about what we can do with ADUs. I'm wondering whether there was a conversation with town council or has one been had about what we can regulate. Obviously, I know in terms of the short-term rentals, that's something we can, but what about, is there any other sort of regulatory
We
oversight
have
that
included town council, so we developed for our own purposes, really, and then obviously it's beneficial for the public. I think it's sitting on the counter at both the planning office and the building office.
It's in the packet.
And
that-
you got it in the packet, the FAQs.
Right.
Town council was, we ran that by town council in the process just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But as I said earlier, even town councils aren't in a great position to tell us what this law means, because at this point, we don't have a lot to go on. And so we're all kind of,
I think that just to piggyback on this a little bit, Lou, I think with your question, one thing that I believe that we can regulate, and I think that's a process that we might get to in 2025, is that situations in which people want to do the ADU, but they want to go above the 900, they don't meet the setback, if they don't check all the boxes by right, as a town, what is going to be our process, or what do we want to do to potentially allow folks who do want to do that? We do have the ability to regulate situations in which people don't check all those boxes. So when they want to go above the height, when they want to go above the 900, and so I think that's something that
or for example, where they don't have they may not have the setback. They're in a
exactly
dense
right.
neighborhood or
So
something like that.
so where we sit, I think as staff, at least internally, we're talking about hopefully by the end of the year, 2026, what are the regulations that we want to put forth in the bylaw for those situations?
Gotcha. And in terms of also, Aaron, in terms of for members of the public, obviously this, the housing production plan is on the town's website.
yes.
Can they get, if someone's, it's a lengthy document, someone wants to get a copy of either your presentation tonight or the,
Happy to provide whatever. If I actually didn't bring a card, but I'm happy to. It's on our website. Reach out to the planning office. My contact information's there. Joshua's contact information there. Get you whatever you need.
and if someone's listening and wants to send comments in or something, they can
Absolutely.
send it along to planning staff.
Absolutely.
You can give
Yep.
us a call.
And we
write
welcome
us
it
a-
again. And I think you kind of needed a straw man to react to, and I don't think the consultant put this out there to be inflammatory. They've been working and doing their work for 9 months. Handed us a draft at the end of January, and we're passing it around to everybody
Okay.
and want to get the feedback. And really appreciate the time the board gave me tonight. Sorry I yammered more than I intended to. It's a complex topic, and we really appreciate the feedback. And should you have any thoughts after this, before I return with the consultant, please let me know. Happy to have a deeper dive conversations with anyone about anything in the plan.
Great.
If I can just go over, Mr. George, just what I got for a checklist here, just to make sure I got it right from the board's perspective.
Okay. Yeah, and we will hear from members of the
And
public
then I know you
too.
might hear
Yep.
from the audience, but, so we're gonna do a little deep dive, or get a response on where is the master plan? Mr. Spittle. Mr. Sears mentioned, why did the trust pay for the housing production plan, and what can we address that? We're gonna add ADUs to the monthly report to all boards that you're currently receiving. And can we get a cut of the demographics by age cohort? So that's my to-do list at the moment. Does that sound about right?
I'm interested also just in knowing, and again, this is maybe picking up on a comment that Jim made too. I'm interested in knowing a little bit about any sort of tools to sort of, potential tools to sort of mitigate any adverse effects of ADUs as well. I guess to the extent, how much can we regulate, but also what we can do, like I know was mentioned about parking. I know you just said, for example, well, if you regulate parking for ADUs, you have to regulate it for single family. So even if that's that sort of answer, if that's the answer, I think I'd like to know that too.
Yep.
Could I jump in on one thing as well, Mr. Chair? Because there was actually something in here that I just noticed that sort of blew me away, which was Is it true that 78% of the parcels in Danvers are non-compliant?
That appears to be correct.
That is crazy
Like non-conforming?
It's a little higher than,
for plot size or frontage.
so.
So
that's-
if I could let me just kind of close that. I'll keep this a tidy tidbit of a thought. Because one is just that speaks to a bylaw that's probably broken, right? It's not really actually governing the land that it governs if 78% are already non-compliant.
It's an old town.
Yeah,
old
or it's an old town.
houses.
I think that relates too because this ADU problem, like I kind of want to temper the doubles our density because if 78% of your plots are non-compliant, like you can't fit an ADU in there.
So,
I'm in a compliant lot. I just looked it up on the map. And I, being the money-hungry capitalist that I am, already looked to see if I can add an ADU to my plot, and I cannot because I can't fit it with the setback. Right? So I think we should temper our, like, suddenly we're twice as
yeah,
dense.
I
I
know,
don't
but
think that's really
here's-
practical.
And I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna about it. Our bylaw says if you have, how would I say this right? Josh will help me. If we have a pre-existing non-conforming structure, single-family home, it's too close to the lot line, it's on a substandard lot, we allow today that property owner to add, expand, modify that property by right, provided everything they're doing goes the right way. So if there's a graphic in my mind I'm seeing, but basically where your setbacks are red and there's some yellow areas where you might need a special permit or a variance to go into, and then there's a whole lot of green towards the middle of the lot. So we allow people in single-family homes to do things on non-conforming lots with non-conforming buildings and non-conforming situations. Because we allow that for single-family homes, we have to allow that for ADUs.
Yeah,
So
so
you
you're
could be
talking
too-
about the
too
'cause
close to
ADUs
the
can
lot
be
line?
in the building, but that means, like you said, you have to have a firewall. It's not really practical.
Yep.
An extension, which is kind of what you're talking about, or a whole new structure.
Yep, detached.
And it also requires people to actually be able to afford to build that right now.
Well, that's the thing too. I think that's a piece too. I want to go down the talk. There's a lot of people from the public. It's just like there is a monetary piece to this. That I mean, it started with our conversation tonight. I mean, we already discussed that there's a significant portion of folks in town who are already struggling to pay for the housing that they're already in. So the percentage of people in a reality standpoint who then are going to say, you know what, I have the means then to, spend a very moderate to a large amount of capital to do this, I think, in reality isn't as high as we all think.
Right. And I appreciate, I think, what Mr. Spittle's saying. I'm not trying to be Chicken Little about it, but I do think, generally speaking, when we adopt new bylaws, and I know not everyone believes it, but we do try to think about the unintended consequences of our actions and try to quantify that, try to understand what it's going to do if we were to adopt this. ADUs are tough because it's not just doing a simple look at the map and saying, blah, 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 it's going to be 3,000. We have a lot of nuanced zoning rules that could allow things to happen in situations that we can't contemplate very easily. So again, that's my concern, is that I just don't know the impact. If you were to tell me how many of those lots, 70% non-compliant, can go, I don't know. Could be most of them, yeah. And that number's a little high that number's a little high compared to other communities, but it's not, again, that unusual. Typically, communities were pretty well developed, then decided to impose zoning restrictions that made no sense on existing neighborhoods that rendered most of those lots non-conforming. 75 years later, here we are. And we made all of those exceptions for pre-existing non-conforming lots and frontages because we were zoning them into non-compliance, but we were taking the ZBA out of them moving ahead in their timelines by saying, well, if you can do it in a conforming fashion, we'll let you proceed by right. Well, 75 years later, now we have ADUs falling into the same category. So again, sorry, it's like a deep dive, but it gets thorny real fast in this topic.
Can you just explain the firewall concept?
Yeah.
What is needed to make a firewall?
Well, there's someone in the audience who's probably a little bit better at the code than I am, but basically separation of
say you
units,
got a split.
like a 2-hour
You got to split,
firewall.
yep.
You might have to gut that wall, reinforce that wall, and create a 2-hour fire separation between those units. Today with an EFLA, I just need to put a door in that so that
Does that include the ceiling? Are we talking the ceiling has to be a firewall?
See the head nod.
Yep,
Yes.
separate unit, separate unit.
And
so-
how hard is it to do, I guess, in
Well-
a standard split?
Jim's asking for a friend.
So that's it.
That's for two families. It's over three family over. It's over.
No, I'm just talking,
1 to 2.
we got a lot of
No.
splits. You take a split and you put some sheetrock, is what you're telling me to give me my firewall.
In your egress, in your hallways, if you go
Yep.
throughout the building.
No, like a split, you're going out the garage and you might have another door you gotta add, and that's it.
Okay.
It's not a lot.
We're also seeing issues around utilities, and again, we're trying to.
No, I'm just trying to say, you're
Yeah, no.
you're throwing up the fire, you're
Yeah.
throwing up the firewall as a real impediment, but it doesn't sound like it's an impediment.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta
That
bring,
said,
you gotta
it-
bring,
the-
you gotta
the
bring a
3 or
water
4
service in.
The 3 or 4.
Okay, why don't we get back here? Can we?
Yeah.
We do have a couple of, I would say we have, we always have about 1 or 2 enforcement actions moving with illegal units. And if getting the firewall were as simple as what we just discussed, I'm not sure why these properties aren't getting their act together and getting compliant. There seems to be some other issues involved that in real world may be a little bit more complicated than that. And again, and Josh was hinting at, developing these new out of the box, these I would think, and our staff, building commissioner's office included, feel that these are more involved to create than an EFLA. That financially, that you need to bring more investment to the table in order to get through our process here than an EFLA would normally require. And that will be that financial impediment may slow some people down. But time will tell. So
I want to see if,
Yep. I'll step aside in case.
I want to see if any members of the public have any, questions or comments. I see Nova. Raise your hand first. Identify yourself for the record. Thank you all for your patience as well.
Sure, it's Nova Samade, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I just want to also echo what Tim and Josh just said, that not everyone has the money or the land for this kind of thing. I know that I am not necessarily a money-hungry capitalist. I will not be putting one of these on my land. I don't want to be a landlord. Not everyone wants to be a landlord. Not everyone is looking to make as much as possible off of their property. If some people do, great. We could use more housing. I know that if I had to buy a house now, I could not afford this town. I bought 20 years ago when I could. And it's great, and I love it, but there's no way I would be able to afford to buy a house now. So I think it'll be okay. I think it's going to be all right. That's all. That's just my opinion. I think over the past 8 years, we rezoned the Maple Street corridor, Maple Street downtown, and High Street corridor. And there was all kinds of discussion about, oh my God, there's going to be all these giant buildings. They're going to go up. We've had one built so far. There's a couple more in the plans, but we've had one. No one is forcing anyone to build these things. It's an opportunity for people. And there's lots of talk of, this is my land, I should be able to do what. So there's got to be a balance between what we want to allow people to do with their property and what we think is too much for them to do with their property. But we can't just say, no, you can't do that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience? Oh, sure, go ahead.
Hi, Lauren Steves, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I talked at the housing production meeting, so I'm not going to replay my whole speech, but kind of the sentiment that Aaron says that the two-family, rezoning all the residentials for two families, I don't agree with it. I'm not sure what other people's opinions are, but I think with the ADUs right now as we have them, I don't see the necessity of rezoning all the residential districts to be all two families. Some people might want to live in a single family neighborhood, and that should be their choice when they're deciding where to live. So I think taking away that choice completely, it's not fair to the people who chose to live where they're living now or the people who might be coming to look to buy a single family home in this town. Additionally, just to add to the survey that kind of propelled the housing production plan, it was a survey of 284 people out of a town of 28,000 that self-selected into this survey. So that's some skewed data to work off of for an entire plan to be recommended, is my opinion on that. So that's all I have.
And thank you, Lauren. I just wanted to pick up on one of the things you said, Aaron, mentioning about the survey.
Yep.
So like, are the stats in terms of the number of households and the sort of the burden on the households in terms of, what they're paying, did that come from the survey?
That was all derived from the census data.
Yeah, no.
So the survey was more an impression that people gave us about their situation and what they intended to do with their property. There was a question about ADUs. I think there was a couple of questions. Again, I think Ms. Steves brings up the point of the number of respondents. We're not happy with 280 responses. We wish we had 28,000. We're doing a transportation survey right now. We hope all 28,000 of you that are watching at home with bated breath, please check out our website and take that transportation survey. That would be great, especially if you're concerned about the process. Because if we only have the self-selecting, like, the housers or the open space people or the transportation people, then we're missing a huge cohort of the community. So if you have concerns about things, I know one member, this is a town, we drive town, take the survey, tell us that so that we get that information. But again, our goals for public engagement through survey is we want much more than what we've got. I felt that we were in betwixt and between. If we didn't do the survey, or we did the survey but didn't share the results because we didn't like the number of respondents, I think we were would have been in no man's land. So
and that's why I wanted to just make sure that the data from the survey in terms of that sort of surprising, the number of people who are, were burdened in terms of, that those are solid numbers as opposed to coming from the survey.
Yep.
Okay. And also a question, I guess, too, just picking up on one of the questions that Lauren had asked as well, in terms of the, if one were, how this works with ADU, if you were to have two-family, let's say, as one of the, I know one of the non-highlighted recommendations, the two-family is a matter of right, which, I have some concerns with as well, in terms of if that were implemented, now ADU, that means you could add to that, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Lois McKenzie, Precinct 3, town meeting member. I just wrote down some notes. So part of the reason for this housing protection plan, it seems to be a lot of it revolves around grants, having met all these requirements to make sure that we can still get the state grants. I know with working with the Friends of Endicott Park that a lot of these grants, most grants, have a lot of strings attached to them. So you got to really look into them and see, is it worth it? Do we really need to do this so that we can get this kind of grant from the state or whoever? One I dealt with was not a state grant, and there were all kinds of attachments to it. We've already met, like you explained, the 10%. We have the ADUs, which are going to throw a monkey wrench in all of it because you're going to require more if you get more housing. And I absolutely do not agree with going from single-family zoning to multi throughout the town. It's like Lauren said, there are many people out there that chose this town because they like the appeal of the character of the town, which with what's going on downtown is changing dramatically. I know she says there's only one built. There are multiple coming at Danvers Hardware. There are coming down on High Street where it's being built right next to a 4-square building. The designs, I walk there all the time. This guy designed, I think it's a 3-story building on a lot that now has a house on it. And there's always the mention that, well, we don't have the housing. If you look on any realtor site, you will see how many rentals are available right now. Maybe they're not considered affordable housing, but that's the cost of living in Danvers. I couldn't go to live in Boxford or North Andover. I couldn't afford it, so you have to look elsewhere. And this is how people have to make decisions through their lives. I'm not saying that, you know, I feel bad for them, yes. But not everybody is capable of getting exactly what they want when they want. It's just life. And as far as, you know, the other thing was the expansion on the downtown, the density zoning. I think we've reached far enough out. I know people that live near the downtown, and they're afraid of all these buildings being built up right next to their houses, and they don't want it. That's my piece.
And that was, I think, one of the implementation items was the suggestion of filling out a missing tooth in.
Or taking the town land.
Yeah.
That was the other thing, we buy all this open space because people in the town want open space. We need more green space. And there's talk of taking the town forest and putting affordable housing there. Next thing you know, they'll take the lot down at Sandy Beach. So.
Again, I think the consultant, in general, I would just say the consultant does their deep dive. They don't know the community well, and they come up with a plan, and that's where our community, for better or for worse, no consultant can read our minds. We have to go through this process of figuring out that goals and objective chapter and what's right for us. And that's what the task will be over the next couple of months, to kind of go to all the various boards and committees that have a say in this and hopefully achieve something of a consensus on to what we want to do.
Any other questions or comments by members of the public? Okay, coming back to the board, any further questions for Aaron? I know we're not making a decision tonight. I mean, so that we'll continue continue this conversation.
Yeah.
So,
And I'll work with Josh on scheduling that. I don't know if it'll be in 2 weeks. It
Okay.
might be a month out, or
sure.
but I'll have to check in with the consultant. And I have the housing trust next week. We had the last month's housing trust meeting was the first presentation of this,
Right.
and we haven't had a chance to digest that. So we'll have a meeting in a week to talk about the plan in more depth, and then we'll start the
Great.
process.
Well, you've heard a lot today, and you've heard,
Yeah.
you heard a little bit at the sort of the preview a couple of
Again,
weeks ago. so-
anybody that has other comments, please let us know. We really do want the feedback. I can put it online.
Yeah, could you?
Yeah.
Yeah, could you actually put, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, could you put the PowerPoint online? Because then if someone wants to read the 100 and something pages or the PowerPoint, either, you know, or they could do both, so.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, that was, yeah,
Great,
absolutely.
all right. All right, so this will be, nothing formal we need to do on this one. This will just be to be continued.
Yeah, just administrative matter, Aaron. We don't need to continue this to a certain date,
Yep.
certain, right, or anything.
Okay. All right, our next agenda item here is the minutes from our last meeting. I believe this was on the 25th of February. Everybody was in attendance, I think, except for Tim. So did anyone, I had one minor comment on the minutes. There was a misspelling. I believe Lois McKenzie's name was said Lewis McKenzie, so I believe she should
We could,
be,
we can
correct
fix-
her name to her correct
we can
spelling of
fix
her
that.
first name. So, okay.
Don't go there.
What's that?
Not going
No, no. So, nope, but that's the only, that was the only, just a typo.
Move to accept the minutes of February 25th, 2025.
Motion's been made by Jim?
Second.
Second? Okay. Second by Jean. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay, next, because we're actually still meeting, so if you could just, yep. So, next items, what do we have coming up for next?
So our next
time?
meeting is on March 25th, so 2 weeks from tonight. It will be here.
Okay,
It will be the 50 Independence Way Chick-fil-A item, which we discussed tonight, got continued to that meeting.
okay,
The partial release of covenant for the Trask Lane
okay,
got continued to that evening. And there's also someone from MAPC is coming to talk about the transportation needs assessment, the survey that Aaron alluded to earlier. So, and I'll send that out to the group tomorrow or
And
by
is
the end
that
of the week.
survey still?
Yep, yep.
still
It's
active?
at least till March 20th, so
Okay.
that would be great. And so we'll have a conversation about that. Someone from MAPC is going to come and talk about that
Okay.
that evening. And then I guess there's potential for this housing conversation to be continued to that evening, but Aaron and I will talk through that.
Okay. And I'd say again, if anyone does have any further comments, questions, please direct them to town
Yep.
staff, both members of our board as well as members of the public.
Yep.
Okay, anything, everybody,
Could I
for March
just-
25th, are we, everybody planning on being in
I think
attendance?
that
Or
Mike was not.
I'm not.
you'll not be, okay, very good.
I just have a question on the Trask Lane.
Yes.
Didn't we determine that we don't have any standing in that? There's no jurisdiction due to the fact that the covenant has expired. We have a legal opinion on that. Why are we having a meeting?
Well, the applicant / developer applied for an application, and so
But it was deemed that we have no authority, we have no jurisdiction, so why are they on the agenda?
You got a traffic peer review, right?
yeah,
They have traffic here, and I think that
They-
they asked about,
they would still like,
They want-
although we, from town council, and I don't think we should get into the weeds too much because it's not on the agenda, but because town council said, I know that the covenant had expired, but the development team or applicant would still like to move forward with, requesting a partial release of the covenant for, their
Title purposes?
for title. I'm assuming.
I think that was that mentioned at the last, I'm trying to remember at the last meeting, I think they talked about that they want, that they still wanted to
Right.
work with it, so.
Right. So we're just, that they want to move forward, so that's
Okay.
why we're going through the process. So.
Got it. I forgot about that part.
Yep, it's fine.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Anything further at all? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Who seconded it? Who seconded it?
I think Jim first and
Second.
second by Mike.
Very good.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Have a good evening, everybody.